Smooth operator. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the It Stands Written podcast. My name is Braden, and today's episode, we are revisiting the second most important decision of your life series. This is a bonus episode. It is titled An Unsentimental Guide to Dating Tactics in the 21st Century. Today, I have with me Justin, and Earnest is back. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ernest, we've missed you,
we
man.
have.
Oh, it's so good to have you back. And a title, The Unsentimental Guide.
Yes.
We have the most unsentimental guy. Actually, we're learning that's not true. You got quite a bit of sentimentality in you.
My girlfriend tells me this update. Since the early episodes, I have a girlfriend.
He's
now.
off the market, ladies.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very qualified because I won the game. We're going to start premarital counseling actually this afternoon.
Tonight, yeah.
As we were recording, so look
Absolutely. Look at that.
But, you know, this podcast was sort of proposed by me, this particular episode. I remember I was telling Justin about the system I use for dating, and he was very interested. And then he was like, well, I'm not sure if this is a good podcast episode because it's also kind of crazy, but it is. And we will get into why I think it's so important to do this, even if it's a little bit insane. So like the good ecumenical councils from church history, this episode comes to you in 6 parts.
Okay, so while we attempt to go through that, let me give you a little of the backstory of that. So you and I were sitting at the Habit Grill, and we were talking about it. Number one, catching up on life. Number two, talking about it. And it was so fascinating to listen to the description of what you were discovering of the positives and negatives of what people encounter. Technology today, and I know you're going to get into this, but technology today allows us so many opportunities to access people like never before. Right now, I'm told we are 4 people away from everybody in the world.
I thought it was 7.
No, it's 4 now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's because of Braden. Because of Earnest. There's a reality that we are never been more connected than we are, and there's certain tools that we've never had access to before that allow us to find things in common about people, where some of the normal obstacles of you live in an urban context or a rural context, or I know we're going to talk about like churches. I don't want the church to be the meat market for dating. I want to go there to give my life with the Lord. I don't want every girl to feel like I'm or every guy to feel like somebody's preying on them, especially if they're part of a singles ministry. And then of course there's that initial reluctance. Well, my friends told me to get on the app, and I never thought I would, but they caused me to. And then
this was also me.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I did not want to get on the apps
for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
So part of what we want to do is straddle a couple things. We want to maintain faithful biblical principles. This episode doesn't revise anything that we said earlier or replace that, but it also acknowledges, I think, something important, and that's in a digital world where our connection to our smartphones and the availability of technology might allow us to access somebody that never in a previous generation did we ever even think was potential, and to maybe even by God's grace find the person that God has handpicked for you in a very different place, in a very different way, that's not necessarily conventional as traditionally applied, but not unbiblical. And we need to be careful too that we don't make our former practices of how we applied principles of dating somehow a biblical standard. Like preferences aren't standard. Like, well, no online dating. You can't go in and say online dating is wrong. There's no verse that says that's a sin. Are there cautions that you should apply? Of course. But the same is true in any kind of dating context. So part of what we're straddling is, how do we be faithful biblically to the principles already in the series, and elastic enough for God to take all these modern advantages that we have and use them in the context of relationships. Each of them has challenges. Each of them has unique opportunities. We want to be candid and realistic as we, I told Earnest before we started here, like, walk us through your story. Tell us where you went. Break these things down. Your mind is so categorically organized. It is so structured so well. So Braden and I are going to kind of hand the keys to you a little bit, and then we're going to do, like I said off before the show started, we're going to put you through the gauntlet. Then we're going to hit you with pillows, and we're going to see, what happens to find out, what would be a satisfying conclusion that all of us can agree on biblically, principles for online dating.
Yeah, and so I guess sort of to start a couple of things, right? Like the reason I went through this whole process because I was very much of the standard sort of like, don't do online dating, so on and so forth. But then I was getting old and I was getting not any closer to being married.
Old.
I'm ancient, you guys.
If Ernest is old, then Justin, what are you?
Oh man, I don't even think they have a word for me. I'm a fossil.
Yeah.
Turn me into oil.
Well, listen, I am almost a quarter century old, which makes it sound very impressive.
Whoa.
And I needed to get on it. And given that nothing was happening, I decided to do something about it. But the problem is there's such a minefield out there. I was able to figure it out because I had a very unique set of blessings and circumstances, right? Like I was just born very intelligent. My parents were incredible in raising me with just like the deepest theology. My dad was basically a seminary professor without being a seminary professor.
That's true.
And so I was able to like go through all of the resources, almost all of which are non-Christian because there are very few Christian resources on this side of dating.
Right.
And extract the good from the bad without becoming like some sort of red-pilled Andrew Tate crazy person. And so it's like, I figured this out, but I figured it out because I'm unique in like the fact that I know all of these things and I have the systematic mind to do all of these and to read a 700-page book on how dating and relationship dynamics work.
Okay, so I want to push back real quick. I want to throttle back the language. I figured it out. So why don't you elaborate on what you mean by that? Because that could come across as I've arrived. I mean, you're starting pre-engagement counseling tonight. Right. You haven't finished anything.
I have figured out the answer.
Right. So let's, sure. You're still in process.
Sure. But what I mean is like I figured out in the sense that like the modern dating market is often a disaster for many people.
Yes.
And I figured out how if you are someone like me who, looks tolerably average and is not super charismatic and is a little bit introverted, can still like do the dating thing that especially for guys is really hard given just the dynamics of like the 21st century dating market.
I think you're pretty good looking.
Oh, well, thank you.
I mean, I'm already married, so
and unfortunately, I'm not in the market for men on account of...
that's probably wise.
There's a couple verses we'd have to address.
More than a couple, but sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just step away from that.
Yeah. But, and I should also note, just like on a vocabulary level, like in a lot of the discussion here, I talk about things like, the dating market and your candidates and your quote value.
Right.
And like, I'm not talking about this in the sense that like people are objects that you buy and sell.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to make that clear.
Yeah, this is an Amazon with a partner on, showing up at, 2 p.m.
Yeah. This is not Amazon spouses.
Yeah, right.
But what it is there's a great book called The Armchair Economist that talks about this more, that will give you the idea. But basically it is like, you don't think of economics, or to use the like very fancy technical term, praxeology, as just like the study of buying and selling stuff on the stock market.
Okay.
It's more it's how people make decisions under constraints when they have limited resources like time and energy and effort.
That's really helpful.
Yeah. So, when you evaluate things of like how, quote, valuable am I on the dating market, it's just that like, people only have a certain number of days that they can commit to going out on dates. They only have so much time. So how do they organize? Who do I prioritize?
Right.
What am I looking for? What do I value? Mm-hmm. And so that's when you're thinking of it in sort of, quote, praxeological economic terms.
Wow. And though I don't think I can spell praxeological, I do even see the value of striving for clarity in advance that most people don't even know what they're looking for. I mean, we're coming from a very sloppy mindset that many people have that we've criticized already on the show, where it's like, okay, you're Christian, you're alive, so you're breathing good. You're Christian and you're the appropriate gender. Great. What else is there? There's so much more than that. And even what you're saying right here, it forces you to have clarity in advance. What are my standards? Mm-hmm. So I think that's universal, but that's one thing that this actually forces you to do at the beginning. So that's actually very helpful.
Yeah.
Praxeological, PRA. I'll work on that.
Come back when you get it.
Okay.
But I think that's like part of why we did this series before, is like going through those 12 different questions. I think that is so important to come first, like answer those questions so you have that standard, what you're looking for, like you have a target to aim at. You're not just doing it willy-nilly, right?
Right. And to be clear, right, like one of the things that I will talk about is the fact that like the modern church is not addressing the tactics of dating. That doesn't mean that what the modern church is doing is bad, right? Like the fact that they spend a bunch of time and energy on the morality of dating is in fact very important.
Yes.
And so like, yeah, the whole 12 episodes, go listen to those first.
Sure.
And then come back for this bonus afterwards.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think sort of to set the stage, it might be helpful to walk through just like the reason why the dating market is so terrible now. Because it's like people have been dating and getting married since the dawn of creation.
This is why we have perpetuity. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's like, but what changed and why is it so terrible now? And to sort of give you the fastest ever history,
okay,
which
I'm in. Go.
We'll cut out a lot of details. But in 1960, we had the sexual revolution, which sort of broke the entire moral framework for how marriage and relationships worked.
Yes.
But we sort of limped along. And it was tolerably fine. But then in the early 2000s, this thing called the iPhone was invented. And then suddenly the one thing you had left, which was lots of social interactions with people and strangers all over the place, vanished. Right. So like if you think about... So this is the thing. If you think about like before, if you went to, I don't know, walk your dog or you were at the gym.
Right.
No one had headphones on at the gym.
Right.
Like
now you don't have anybody that doesn't.
Yeah. And like, I'm a Zoomer, so I have never been to a gym without a million headphones.
I don't know what a Zoomer is.
Gen Z person.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
You're definitely a boomer.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My praxeology is adjusting.
But it's like, so you can't even imagine that. But if you imagine like in the 90s, no one had a headphone. Maybe one guy had a Walkman. And it's just like no one had. So you would just talk to people all the time. So you were meeting hundreds, probably thousands of people over the course of a year. And that gave you all of these chances for social interaction to maybe find someone who is interesting and to start dating them. You don't have that anymore because everyone's locked behind headphones. So you have, first of all, you have no longer the moral structure because that was gone in the 60s. You don't even have the social interaction because that was gone in the 2000s. And now you're like, wait, so where am I supposed to meet people?
Right.
And then in the 20 teens, it was not terrible because we moved online, but the first generation of online apps was really good. And then they became terrible because the economic incentives pushed dating apps to be terrible. So if you think about it, and we'll have links in the show notes for a bunch of these, but OkCupid used to be the premier dating app. It was so good at getting you married. It's terrifying.
I've never heard of it. And I was married in 1996, so I didn't need it. But OkCupid. So elaborate on that.
So OkCupid, like it was the system. It would give you lots of space for text to be able to describe your personality, and it had a bunch of questions that it would answer back and forth, and then it would rank you on compatibility with the questions.
Interesting.
And it was great at its job. The problem was it was so good, someone would subscribe, spend 3 months on the app, find someone, get married, and then never subscribe again. Then Tinder comes up. Tinder keeps you subscribed month to month to month.
Interesting.
And keeps you on there, giving you just enough.
How do you know? What do you mean, how do you know?
Oh, I used Tinder before I was saved.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't pay for it. That's just dumb.
That's why you got all the ugly girls in your profile, right? Sorry.
But like, that's exactly the thing.
Are there layers like that where if you want like the ugly girls, you go to this level? If you get like the not so ugly girls and then like the glamour shot models, is that?
Not exactly, but a little bit. Well,
I'm just asking for people out there who would want to know that.
For a friend.
Yeah.
We'll get into how to game the dating app algorithms.
Yes.
But the thing is like, so you have to think of like, and what ended up happening was OkCupid, which was amazing, ended up getting bought out by Match Group, which owns basically every dating app.
Interesting.
And then lobotomized and turned into a crappy clone of Tinder. Because if you're a clone of Tinder, you will keep people on there. It'll keep them just satisfied enough that they think they can get something, so they'll keep swiping and they'll stay subscribed, but they won't actually get married because then they would stop paying for the app.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, that's wild.
Yeah. So the dating apps are actively against you, and like their algorithms are actively structured to be terrible for you. And there's another video by Me Mobile Data that we'll have in the show notes that talks about not only are the algorithms against you, but even if you put that aside, just the different ways that like men and women act and the different percentages of men and women are dating apps who are on dating apps will just make it terrible, so that you're going to have, the typical thing where a woman gets 100 likes to every one like that a guy gets.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. It's wild.
This is so eye-opening.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, Justin, you were last chopper out of Saigon, sort of flying out in the 90s.
Yeah,
just before
that was. Wow. I have that visual now.
Yeah.
My praxeology is still. Okay.
I'm glad you're so fascinated with the word praxeology.
I am, but please keep going. This is absolutely unbelievable. I love this.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense what you're saying. Keep going.
Yeah, and so the math of dating apps is terrible, and so the good one, like OkCupid, got lobotomized and died, and so now there are no good dating apps. And you don't have the moral framework because that was taken away in the 60s. And you don't even have the social framework because that was taken away in the 2000s.
Interesting.
And so everyone is struggling. And that leads us to part 2, which is everyone is struggling and almost no one is talking about it. And no one at all in the church is talking about it.
Right.
And I want to give like a little bit of credit to the churches. There's a reason why they're not, which is
why?
Churches have it better than the secular world.
Okay.
Right. Like the thing about it is churches still have the social interaction that was deleted in the 2000s.
Right.
Because we have church.
Right.
And churches still have the moral framework that was deleted in the 60s because we have the church and the faith once delivered for all time.
Yeah, God's word.
But the thing is, what if you're like in a small church? If so our church, it's 75 people or so on an average Sunday. It's not very big. So if there's no one there for you to marry, what are you supposed to do? Like just sit there and hope your wife or your husband walks through the door one day?
Yeah, they
like,
might already be in your pocket on your smartphone. Yes.
Yeah. And so like the thing is like, if you're stuck there and it's like, well, I could abandon my church, but that seems like a terrible option.
Right.
And it's like, so the church is a little insulated, which I think is one of the reasons why the church isn't talking about it.
I think to quick add another reason why the church might not talk about it in like dating apps is just because of kind of the stigma behind dating apps that like it's just meant for hooking up and just one night stands and stuff like that. Like Tinder was literally created for that.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Like
Tinder specifically
was just made for one night stands.
Meant to be a hookup app.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's got that idea behind it, and like people literally use it for that. So I think that's kind of why the church is steering away.
Yeah. And that's one of the big things too, right? Like I was in this boat like 2 or 3 years ago where I did not want to be on dating apps at all. I was like, what?
Do you want to clarify which boat you mean you were on? Because we just talked about on apps where people are hooking up. Do you
I
want
was
to
on the
create some distance from that?
Yeah. To be clear, I was on the dating apps are bad boat because I thought the same thing that Braden was saying. It was like, dating apps are just this hookup place, so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, sure. And you don't want to be anywhere near that.
Right. And so, but it's like, if there is no one to meet in church, dating apps are quite a good option, and I'll get into the whole system of how this works. And by the way, quick aside, if you are a non-Christian and you're listening to this and you're like, a bunch of this doesn't apply to me because you're talking about all this church stuff, and that's correct.
Yes.
Go get saved first and then listen to the other 12 episodes and then come back to this one. I care about my siblings in Christ. If you're not and the dating market sucks for you, well, you got bigger problems anyway.
So before you go on then, why don't you give a 30-second how to get saved?
Sure. So there's 4 questions. Who, what. Who is God? He is holy. He is righteous. He is perfect. Who is man? He is unholy. He is unrighteous, and he is destined to hell. And I can prove this to you very quickly. Have you ever lied? The answer is yes.
No.
Have you ever stolen something?
Yes.
There we go. Have you ever, looked at someone and been covetous or jealous of and envious of what they have?
Mm-hmm.
Great. You just broke 3 of the 10 commandments. We could go through the rest, but you said 30 seconds. So you're going to hell. That's not great. But then there's 2 more questions. What did Jesus Christ do? He died on the cross for our sins. So what must man do? Romans 3:10. If you confess with the mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation.
Actually, Romans 10:9, but thanks for playing. Yes, that's right. Correct.
There were a few more verses. I cut it short.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty spectacular. Okay. So continue.
So now that you're saved, good job, ladies and gentlemen. So let's talk about specifically like the issue is bad for both men and women, but like for men, it is particularly terrible. Because
you say 1 like for every 100 likes that a girl gets.
Yes, that's about
part of their algorithm. That's part of their plan. That's part of their.
That's not exactly intentional. That's just the way like the math
just the
breaks
stats.
out.
Okay, got it.
Just because men and women like at different rates. Because one of the things is right, like men were created to be pursuers, to be leaders.
Right.
And so they will send a lot more likes on apps. Men tend to be more exploratory, so they will be on more apps and on apps more often. So there's a bunch of reasons, and the memeable data video that we'll have in the show notes talks about the math behind why it's so terrible.
Wow.
But so like this is really bad for men, right? Like it's not great. And if the only alternative, because the church is not addressing this, is like the red pill Andrew Tate types, then the thing about the like red pill people is that they are.
Most people don't know what you mean by that. Why don't you clarify what you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is there's this community of quote red pill people. Red pill is also used as a political term, but it's also used in this like dating and relationships area to mean like people who have discovered the lies of dating, and that actually all women are like these terrible harpies who are out to get you and then marry you and divorce you and steal everything from you in divorce courts, because the divorce courts are stacked against men, which is true. The divorce courts are stacked against men.
Yeah, right.
And like the dating market is terrible for men, but like the problem is, so these red pill types, they have the diagnosis correct, but their treatment is the worst possible option. It's like a doctor telling you, well, we found out you have cancer, so my solution for you is here's a bottle of arsenic. It's like, thanks. I in fact don't want to become a guy who manipulates women and sleeps around and treats them as trash objects, because that's both terrible for them and also, as it turns out, very depressing for you in the long run.
Yeah, not to mention eternally consequential.
Yeah, not to mention your eternal soul. That's pretty important too.
Yeah, that too. Wow.
And there's a great video by a channel called Macabre Storytelling, where this guy, it's about 2 hours long. It's a long video, but this guy talks about where he was exactly the kind of person that I am worried about, that sort of I was a few years ago, which is he was a sort of young guy. He was a little bit introverted, a little bit socially awkward. Basically, to use the Zoomer term, he didn't have any riz. And this was very bad.
I only vaguely know what you mean by Riz, but I'm with you.
Well, you have 5 kids, so hopefully they inculcate a little bit of that.
I got Riz.
And so like, because he didn't have Riz, like he was like, I don't know how to approach women, and like no one is teaching me in this modern world. And so, the only people who said it were the red pill types. And so he falls into this hole, and he talks about how like it ended up with like he learned how to like manipulate and sleep around with a lot of women, and he hated his life. And so that's lovely. And this video I would also recommend, just because partway through he talks about like the thing that the red pills will get you on is that they are correct in the sense that they will give you useful tactics, but they will surround those like technically useful things with like, hey, here's how to present yourself confidently. Here's how to dress well, and stuff like that, with all of their toxic ideology about how women are harpies out to get you or whatever.
Which the whole time you're talking, I'm going, okay, so a godly man who's teaching a young man how to be a leader, how to be a servant, how to be chivalrous, how to be what the scripture describes the godly woman, what she should be looking for. Like, where's that guy? Like, who along the way forgot to give some of the most basic principles? Where it's like, well, I don't need that. What are even some of the basic principles of just life? Making sense of how you dress, how you present yourself, how you brush your teeth, comb your hair, wear nice shoes. I mean, just some basic things like that. Like, who dropped the ball on that made that so appealing? Like, eureka! So I've bought into the whole system. But it is interesting your point. If I recognize I need those basic, simple things, now that's the gateway into all your other ideology that is telling me how can I achieve this goal, which could be very, very selfish.
Right. And so like the thing is, if you ask like, if you're like, oh, what are some like tips for dating? Like normal people will be like, oh, be more confident. Thanks. I hadn't thought about that. Really? It's shocking. Whereas the red pill people will be the kind of people who tell you like, hey, be more confident by like, if you're not confident in social situations, here's a way you can just practice conversing with strangers over and over again until you get good.
Interesting.
And then it's like, oh, so that's actually useful, actionable advice.
Yeah.
But then
interesting.
They will sort of bury that advice with all of their toxic garbage.
Okay, so how much of this too, this may be an excursion, not where you want to go, but it's on my mind and I think it's relevant. How much of this is people who when you go to the store hungry, you'll eat almost anything.
Yes.
You get online and you're desperate, you're discontent, you feel your own identity is attached to your worth, which is how you can present yourself, and hoping somebody out there in the greater universe of access to online whatever will find that in me and recognize it. Like, well, the hungry heart who wants someone to value them and validate them. Well, how does that play into all of this?
Yeah. And I mean, like the thing is, right, like the Bible, obviously, it spends the whole book extolling marriage, because unlike Catholics, we're not super fans of just like virginity all the bloody well time. And so, the
Bible. Just until marriage.
Just until marriage. But the
The empty heart, the hungry heart.
Thank you. The thing is, like, the Bible spends all of this time talking about the good of marriage, right? Like, we are designed for it. Other than those people who have been called to singleness, the vast majority of us are designed for marriage.
Right.
So if we don't have marriage, we sort of have this very natural God-given desire that's foiled. And like, ultimately, you always find your satisfaction in Christ first and foremost.
Right.
But it is also true that if I have not had food for 35 days, that I am extremely susceptible to the sin of gluttony if suddenly you plop me in like a hometown buffet or
Even
whatever.
the rice cakes look good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You with your just rice cake hatred.
I hate rice cakes.
But so you have this very natural desire, but because it's foiled and you have nowhere to go with it, you're just like, someone tell me something. And then you look at the red pill types and they're like, well, the reason is because all women are these terrible people out to suck your soul and take all of your money. And they're just these like creatures who have been built by evolution to only care about like status and wealth and whatever.
But there are women who are truly like that. So it reinforces
and that's the thing that makes it even worse, because some women are.
Right.
And so you're like, well, I saw
they're
one
on these
terrible.
apps, many of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I met a terrible woman, so they must all be like that.
But the hungry heart and the empty soul that's never been instructed in God's word and never had anybody truly value them for them. Now, in social media, in a day and age where you can actually change your profile picture, you can modify through filters what you are. You can go get plastic surgery, not to look like somebody else, but look like you as modified by your app. Now I'm presenting myself to a world that I'm hoping somebody will find value in what is external and fading. You're competing with all of that too.
Oh yeah, and of course the thing is the dating apps, as they have been increasingly lobotomized and optimized over time, are built very heavily around looks, right? Like we'll get into this a little bit later too, but the dating apps have a very constrained word count for the specific reason that if you have a lot of words, you can compete on something other than looks. Whereas if you constrain your word count a bunch, well, then you're going to be evaluating much more on pictures. Oh, look at that. A bunch of shallow, skin deep relationships based on like how hot this guy looks on some pictures.
If the picture's even the real person.
Yeah.
Like how many stories have we heard of people who are like, they showed up and like, like something out of a Friday the 13th or something.
I just have to gloat and say that like my girlfriend was like, well, you actually look better in person.
Wow.
Than on the photos. So that's just because I look
Good
amazing,
job.
Whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
And also very humble too. She said that, right?
Oh, yeah. She said I was the most humble man that she had ever come across or even heard of in story and tale.
Wow. That's great. Makes me question her mental status, but kidding. So, okay, this is actually really insightful, and I know you're steering us in a certain direction, but this is helpful to intersect with because what we're doing is legitimizing that there are things, there's landmines, lots of them, but there's things that people who created for nefarious purposes. There's those who want to actually hinder you from achieving what would be useful. There's those who want to create a picture of what that relationship should look like through this process that are warping yours. There's people who are doing it for dark and even desperate reasons. So already you're kind of accumulating here a list of the reasons why some people say just forget it altogether.
Right.
But you're advocating for no. There's a way forward in this. If eyes are open to some of the challenges and pitfalls, there's actually a way to crack the code or cheat the system and still utilize for the tactical advantage of what algorithms offer, but with a wise mindset. Keep going.
Yeah, and one of the reasons too I advocate dating apps is because the social interaction is so much weaker since the invention of the phone.
Okay.
It's just you both don't have a lot of the chances you would have had in previous generations where, again, you would go to the gym or you would go for a walk or you'd be in the grocery store and you would meet all of these people and you would chat with them. And you don't have that. And so you have to replicate that somewhere if you were in a small church.
Yeah.
Again, if you were in a church with like 1,000 people, there is someone there for you to marry, almost certainly. Go there. Like it is so much better to find someone in church where you know their family, you know their background, you've probably been acquainted with them for months or years, seeing their service in church. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing.
Well, there's a limitation on what you can do from a distance. Even long distance relationships who have to wrestle with some of these same issues is you can develop great communication, but you don't see each other in real life. You need a real life context.
Yes.
So those are very similar challenges even in those other spaces outside of online dating.
Right. And Ernest, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of what I'm hearing as your intent of this episode is is for those, I mean, male or female that are hungry, they're searching for something and they just can't, it's not working, small church, getting out there just isn't working. You want to help them guard their heart, protect them from abandoning their morals, from slipping in to something, to a path that they shouldn't even take. I'd say that's your intent, correct? That we want to protect them from that wrong path.
And the thing is, like, I understand the pain and the desire on a sort of very visceral level. And like, I understand as being like the kind of socially awkward guy who, especially in the modern day where because you have the phone and the internet, it's so much easier to disappear into a giant pile of books and to read a bunch of stuff that like Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas wrote rather than like go out and meet people. And so it becomes increasingly, for the kind of people who are not very extroverted, difficult to just have the constant social interaction that makes you better at understanding how to approach women and how to go out and how to date and how to do all of these things. Right, like briefly to tie a bow on the macabre storytelling video from earlier, he has one section where he actually extracts a bunch of the most useful info from the red pill people, and he just presents it all at once in like a 30-minute segment. It's excellent. So like, if you are the kind of socially awkward guy who does not have a lot of riz, watch that video, because he will both protect you from the fact that the red pill people are terrible, but he will also give you all of their best stuff all at once.
Give us a teaser, like what?
Sure. So one of the things he talks about is like, apparently on dating apps, people will spend ages texting back and forth. And he is, don't do that. Text them and then just like ask them out on a date. You spend 3 weeks texting them and then they get bored and they stop responding to you and you're like, oh, I couldn't reach anyone. That's why.
Yeah.
And he has lots of stuff like he talks about like, hey, how can you tell if something is going well, if something is going poorly? He talks you through a lot of the basics that a lot of young guys just don't have, because it's so much easier these days to just hide in a pile of books.
Right.
That they don't have the practice that you would have had in, the 1990s or any time before the smartphone, where you kind of had to be outside all the time because you would be bored at home. There wasn't an internet to keep you entertained.
Right. Huh. Okay, this is actually very fascinating. Keep going.
And a quick caveat, and I will have to caveat almost all of the resources I give you as we walk through this, because again, because Christians basically never talk about this, all of the resources I am citing to are non-Christian. Now, they are the best non-Christian resources I can find, but I have to caveat all of them. So like, this guy, while he's quite good, is still sort of like a moderate lib. So he's like, as long as like you like the girl and you get consent, whatever, you can sleep around.
Right.
Which, like, don't do that.
We would not agree with that, but it is interesting because even in this space, people who are made in the image of God but don't know God can discover things that are helpful that God has said already, or that people can find practically useful. That we learned this phrase in seminary: all truth is God's truth. If it's true, because God is the source of truth, even if it came from someone who doesn't fully understand the source of it, truth is true because it's true. And there's certain things that they would find its origin spot in God. But whatever discipline you're in, you don't have to be a Christian to be a math teacher.
Right, of course.
But 1 + 1 is 2. Then that's God's truth. Now, truth like that isn't of the same weight and consequence as special revelation, biblical truth. But a stopped clock is right twice a day. There are times when a blind pig can find an acorn. So there are certain things that people will say that are helpful by way of observation. In fact, there's a whole field of psychology, observational psychology, where they can spend their entire lives trying to quantify and organize what they observe. And put it together for us in a very helpful way, where we who have a biblical paradigm to interpret that and know the God of that truth can use it helpfully without being defiled by the other stuff that they've added to it.
Yeah. So that's how you have to think about basically all of the resources I will be giving you.
Okay, so that's helpful. I appreciate that caveat. That's good.
Like, think of them as like secular psychology. It's got lots of useful stuff. It's also got some really wonky stuff that's just completely off base and wrong.
And part of what you're doing is separating the meat from the bone here. Spit out the bones, eat the fish, and here's what's useful of that. And we're doing this so that they don't have to.
So to sort of summarize very briefly, dating markets are broken. And it's specifically terrible for men. It is also terrible for women, because while men have the problem that they cannot get attention, for women, it's the opposite problem. They get way too much attention, especially online. Again, remember that 100 to 1 likes ratio. So if you're a guy and you get like 4 likes over the course of a week, a woman got 400. What the heck is she supposed to do with this? Like, the problem with women for filtering is also a really big one. And
how much is this a woman opening herself up to flattery? How much of this is a woman opening up herself to catcalling and the classic, let me just find a new way to objectify you online?
Yeah, and this is another problem too, that like if, women get hundreds and hundreds of likes, they sort of start getting this unrealistic expectation that like, I am hyper desirable, I am perfect, and it's very easy to fall into that. And so it's just terrible all around. And for the women listening, if you are also on this podcast trying to find some stuff, I will have some particular advice later.
Okay.
I am a guy, so I could not field test the advice, so I have much less of it, unfortunately, than I do for guys. But hopefully,
I won't ask you how many likes you got. That's okay. Keep going.
Yeah.
You don't have to disclose.
Not a lot, actually.
Okay.
Surprisingly, but
as handsome as you are, I'm surprised.
You work the system, because that's not uncommon.
Okay.
But I will have a little bit of advice for the women, but hopefully if the men listen to the podcast and do their jobs well, you will be found anyway. So, but we'll get to the advice specific for women in a little bit. Before we get to solutions, I should introduce you to part 3, which is this really that important? Because
is what important?
The whole dating system and like
is dating important, or is the online dating platform important? Which one do you mean?
When I say is it that the system I'm going to introduce you and the value I put on like dating and relationships.
Yep.
And my answer is yes in 2 parts.
Okay.
Yes, 1, because it is the second most important decision of your entire life, as we've called this whole series. And 2, like, what will happen is people will say that like, oh, shouldn't I just quote, let this happen naturally? And no, you shouldn't.
I prefer that way.
To let it happen naturally?
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, footnote here. So before you answer and give your rebuttal, we should also identify that our moderator here, Braden, has recently dropped the rock on his wife-to-be, Tessa. Don't even mention her last name, because it's not going to be her last name for a long.
No.
Big old rock on her finger Sunday morning. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
And that happened since this series started. So I just want you to know, just listening to the series, you're going to get engaged.
Guaranteed, or your money back?
Yeah, exactly. Money back. You have money back
for this free podcast.
Yes, exactly. But you push back on that. Go ahead. You prefer it to happen naturally.
I prefer it to happen naturally, because that is how it happened for me. But like I can see Ernest's point of view that like some people it just doesn't really happen that way, or like for me I wasn't necessarily pursuing anything. It was just kind of God, how he worked it out, just put her in my life and how we met. But if it's different than that way, then totally I get.
Doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay. So push on that. Keep going.
Yeah. So one of the resources, the Pragmatist Guide to Relationships, which I will also talk about more later, but the introduction to their book starts like this, and I'll just read you the first 2 paragraphs, which is, they're answering the question in the introduction, why read this book? People hate thinking systematically about how to optimize their relationships. It is normal to hear someone say, I will just wait for something to happen naturally, when talking about one of the most important aspects of their life, while genuinely believing that this approach has reasonable odds of success. Imagine if people said the same thing about their careers. It would sound truly bizarre for someone to expect a successful career to just happen naturally.
That's true.
And yet it is entirely normalized to expect that good relationships will. People spend tens of thousands of dollars to receive degrees in computer science, marketing, and neuroscience. They make tough sacrifices with the understanding that the skills and knowledge they build in these domains will dramatically affect their quality of life. Ironically, people spend very little time systematically examining mating strategies, despite the fact that a robust understanding of the subject can dramatically affect quality of life.
Mating strategies. Just wanted to underline that.
Well, it was a book written by neuroscientists and psychologists.
Yeah, but he makes a very good point there. Is intentionality.
Right. What I want you to do when you're dating is like be intentional and be willing to invest, if necessary, an enormous amount of time and energy into it. Like,
especially given the weight and the consequence of this decision. Yeah.
Like if you would spend $50,000 in 4 years of your life going to college.
It's way more than that, but continue.
Sure. Yeah. If you're going to a poor state college and sending all your kids to masters.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Some people on this podcast have.
Oh, man.
But the thing is, like, if you're willing to spend that much time and energy just to get a degree so you can have a good job, how much more should you be willing to spend on the person that you get one shot to marry that's going to be there for the rest of your life?
Right.
And which is the second most important decision of your entire life.
Yeah,
far more than a career or a university degree is.
Fair enough.
Right. And I like what you were reading from that book too, because it, similar to how the Bible talks about waiting on God. That's not just a waiting and sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something to fall into your lap, right? That is a waiting, but moving forward as you wait and trust in God.
Yeah, waiting time isn't wasted time.
Right. It can be if you're not going about it the right way.
Right. Yeah. You could totally miss it. And because what they described in there that you read was a person who's passive and lazy for something that's consequential and requires God to literally smack you over the head with something to get you to see it.
Right.
Which he can do, but there's a proactive side that's very natural and very built into God's design.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not saying that like you have to use my system specifically or else you're a sinner.
Right. No, that's not coming across that way.
I just mean that like approach this intentionally and be willing to spend time and energy and effort on it, and just say that like, well, why am I not just like falling in love at first sight as I walk through the grocery store aisles or something?
Because you don't shop at Trader Joe's. All the cute. Do you not watch Hallmark? All the cute girls are at Trader Joe's.
If I was in a seaside town at Trader Joe's, I would have gotten married 3 years ago.
Yes. And watch for the girls that move from the big city because they need to get away from it all. That's about the point I fall asleep when my wife is watching this.
Yeah. So, but with that sort of out of the way, let's talk about the longest section of this podcast, part 4, the practical dating advice system for men. And, ladies, in part 5, we'll talk more specifically about you.
So this is just for the fellas?
Not exactly. A lot of this stuff is cross-gender applicable.
Wow.
So a lot of it will be useful for women, but of course it's more targeted at men.
Did you just say cross-gender on this podcast?
Cross-sex useful, cross-biological sex useful.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, no, it's worse. Keep going.
To be clear,
but specifically, this is the dating system for men. It includes women. But go ahead. All right.
So to sort of build out my philosophy, right? Like when you're finding someone a partner to be the in the second most important decision of your entire life, you want to treat it again very seriously. So when you are considering strategies, which strategies should you use? You should use them everywhere, and all at once.
Well, okay. So and that's the word that needs to be underlined here. Strategy. You're talking about a specific strategy.
Yeah.
One of the things that we said in the series at the beginning is strategies can vary.
Yes.
When you look at all the strategies in the Bible, you can't pick one that is the biblical method. So we underlined that strategy can adapt. And that's something we undergirded at the beginning, from person to person, situation to situation. But the character of the person is ultimate.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. It's not use my strategy. It is that use every strategy that is available to you.
Okay.
To its fullest extent.
Okay.
And be willing to put in the effort and energy for that.
And if somebody wants to go, that doesn't work for me, there's different aspects of that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, of course. But and we'll have this video in the show notes called How to Find a Wife in a Fallen World by this channel called Based Camp, where they talk about the system there is even more extreme than my system, so maybe tone it down like 2 or 3 notches.
Is that a biblical site or no?
It's not. The reason they're useful is they are conservative and highly intelligent, maybe more libertarian if you were talking on a political spectrum.
Okay, no, that makes sense here. The language is very Ecclesiastes like,
they're
we use that language in our church.
They very highly respect the John Calvin and the Puritan tradition, although they don't buy into the theology.
Okay,
but.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and so they talk about like, and it's a husband and wife team on this podcast.
Okay.
They talk about how they approach dating and marriage.
All right.
And theirs is slightly different from mine, but you can hear the way they systematically thought about it. And like, again, you adapt the strategy for your needs, but they sort of show you the amount of and intensity of effort that is necessary, and they may have tips in there as well that you're like, ooh, that's a good idea. But remember, they're not Christian, so again, take their things with a grain of salt.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to remind our audience. Yes.
So for me, when I was on my sort of dating campaign, I was aiming for 3 first dates a week. And I was assuming that it would probably take me about 50 first dates before I found someone to end up going steady with.
Okay.
Which is a lot and does not include the occasional second and third.
Sorry, I was pulling up the site for How to Find a Wife.
Yeah. And
do you have to have weird glasses like these people do in order to be a part of the site?
Hey, I wear Harry Potter glasses. So
you kind of do. I was going to carve it in your forehead too, but I said it against it many times.
The first time my parents saw them, they were like, "Why did you buy Harry Potter glasses?" And there was actually a specific reason related to dating, which we will also end up getting to.
Okay.
So I'll leave that tidbit for you to wonder about.
There's a cliffhanger. Okay.
So there was a lot of concurrent first, second, and third dates going on as I was.
So I derailed your thoughts. So go back. You would do 3 dates a week, first dates.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the goal. 3 first dates a week plus the occasional second and third date.
Now, so you just lost some of our listeners because they're, and that's okay. And we're just to clarify, because some of them are going to be like, whoa, I want to do 1 at a time. You're doing 3. Right. What is that?
So the reason I am doing this is because this early part is not about. Let me phrase this well because I don't want you to get the wrong idea.
That's okay.
The first couple of dates are not about falling in love. They are about doing your basic vetting of like, is this person even a Christian?
Okay.
Do we have even the most basic alignment on what we value in life and where we're going?
So would you call that a date?
I suppose you wouldn't have to call it a date as such. You could call them like, coffee meetings or whatever.
The reason I ask you is language matters and nuance is important in a conversation like this. Sure. So when we talk about dating here, we're saying, okay, testing the waters for marriage. So you wouldn't test the waters for marriage with 3 different people at a time. Just you're going, who are the people that I'm narrowing down as I'm getting to know? So when we use the word dating, it's very specific and triggered language.
I guess you could say this would be testing the waters for dating.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's actually
really
a good way to put it. So let's call it proto-dating.
Yeah.
So
praximological dating.
Yeah, so you're sort of doing you're proto-dating a bunch of people at the same time because you're not like talking to 3 different girls at the same time being like, I think I might marry one of you 3 simultaneously.
But it is in your mind.
Yeah.
You're thinking it.
You're thinking it long term, but you're not, at this point, you're just doing the most basic evaluations because you know nothing about them. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to spend the time, and same thing, whether you're a woman meeting a man for the first time or a guy meeting a girl, you're in these like first 1 or 2 proto dates, what you're doing is you're just trying to spend the time to be like, is there anything here at all? Or did I just see a nice profile that doesn't actually have any substance to it?
Now, the people that are putting themselves on the profile, they're coming though with an assumption that what you see is something that if you click and initiate something with me, you apparently like.
Right.
So there is an expectation that's created. It's not just like, hi, what's your name? You want to, sit down. There's some unspoken understanding already said online, not to each other directly. And I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm just going, there's this expectation. I'm here at the table, right? Because we both made a point of agreement at some place online, even if our friends coerced us, that we would be open to taking this step to, I like the phrase testing the water for dating. Yeah. I think that's really a great way to say that. Put it. Yeah. And some of our listeners right there are going, I don't ever want to do that. And that's okay. There's no judgment there if they don't want to. They don't prefer to do that. But at least to understand terms and the process, I think that's very helpful. So anyway, I don't want to derail you. Keep going.
Yeah. So you sort of, you go on these simultaneous, you're going on these proto dates. And I remember because I had a friend of mine talk to me about exactly this thing. And he was like, aren't you sort of making commitments that you can't keep when you're going on all of these?
It's a fair question.
Yeah. And essentially what it is because he is not online dating. And I think one of the things is if you have not, I think there's a very large expectation, especially for the first meeting in online dating settings, that it is the most casual thing you can imagine, because again, you have probably not even heard each other's voices. You have texted a few times, and then you're showing up for the first time. So it's sort of, I think it's pretty well understood that these first meetings, proto dates, call them what you will, are not commitment bearing. That usually happens, a few meetings in where you get to the point where you're like, okay, I think we should make something serious of this.
How important do you think it is in those first meetings to underline that? Because what could be your expectation as you go in could be the person that's going, I love your profile. I've stalked you on every social media platform that you are. You're the best thing I've ever seen. I want to marry you. And they're coming into the thing. They've never actually heard what your voice sounds like, but they're already in love with you. Like you can manage as much of that as in yourself as possible. Right. But the person that you never met, you have no idea where they're actually literally at, unless you have some sort of ground rule that you've agreed upon.
Yeah. And I think that I'll talk at later on, I have a specific section. Listeners, a little bit of background here. Justin asked me to actually write out a entire outline for this. So we have a 6-page outline that I'm sort of walking through. So we will get to some of the things you can do, like talking on the first date to help with this. But I think that as long as you're sort of clear in your presentation that we're here meeting for the first time. I just want to get to know you a little bit. This is not a marriage proposal. I don't have a ring. I just like to drink some coffee and chat and like
Yeah,
learn a
and
little
there's
bit
no
about
strings
you.
attached. Both of us can walk away. If neither of us want to see each other again, that's understood. That's fine.
Yeah.
So setting intentions at the very beginning is very important.
Yeah,
you'd say.
I'll talk a lot about like you want to be clear on your intentions and what you're meaning and doing.
All right. And we're getting a little ahead, but it's relevant to each of the. Yeah.
To
Okay.
be sure. So, when you're dating, one of the things, and this will be the thing that is most crazy, but I will answer the most likely objection in a little bit once I explain it, is that you want to keep what I call the dating notebook.
Didn't they already make a new movie called The Notebook?
They did. That's actually in this outline too. We'll get to that in a
No,
moment.
I've never seen the movie.
Neither have I.
I haven't either.
Yeah. Okay. So,
But we'll get to that movie.
but
in a
I'm
moment.
told once you do, it's like whoever you're watching with falls in love with you. So,
Good to know.
Yeah.
But so the dating note, the dating notebook here, what it is, it's I put it in 3 parts. Again, modify the questions for yourself, make them whatever you need them to be.
Okay.
But for me, I had part 1 was just a couple of very basic pass-fail questions of like, is this girl I'm going out with, is she seriously looking for marriage? Is she open for marriage? If she's just like, well, I'm just exploring the dating water, so on and so forth. First of all, I don't think you should be doing that as a Christian. But if she is, then we're not going to be compatible.
okay, somebody's going to hear what you just said and say that contradicts what you just said.
Well, what I mean is they're the kind of people who are like, oh, I'm just dating to explore, but I'm
Dating
not
to date.
dating to date. Yes, I'm not dating to marry.
Okay, I see. Okay.
If they're like, yeah, I want to get married at some point. That's what I'm looking for when I'm on this app.
Okay, that goes back to
what I'm looking
clarify.
It goes back to the intent of it. Like the intent is marriage.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other questions I had was, does she want kids? Is she a Christian, and is she against infant baptism? To walk through these very quickly.
Wow.
There's a specific reason infant baptism is on there particularly.
Okay.
Which is why, like, of course you want her to be generally Christian, but the reason infant baptism is on there is because, like, Lutherans, great people. I will see many of them in heaven. But the thing is, if I'm dating a Lutheran and then I find out like 3 months into it that she's really firm on infant baptism, what happens? Either we now break each other's hearts, or we're going to get married, and either I'm going to baptize our kids and then give them a false sense of assurance I don't believe they should have,
fair enough.
or we're not going to baptize our kids and she's going to believe I'm denying them God's grace. And it's like, so that's a sort of very clear, like, listen, you may be a wonderful Christian, but we can't get married. And so like there's no point in like pursuing this and falling in love and then figuring out months later what you could have figured out on the first date.
I never would have thought to throw infant baptism in the first date, pre-date conversation. So I have my whole...
It pops up briefly.
My whole world just got flipped upside down. And now I'm wondering what kind of a terrible leader I was because I never asked Gianna
Oh,
that.
Justin, what a sinner. What a terrible man.
I think that's the first question you should ask.
Yeah, you should be like, hi, before I get your name, infant baptism.
Don't even
thoughts.
shake their
I need a
hand yet.
dissertation.
Yeah.
Because they don't even know what that is. They're not sound in doctrine, they're not Christian. So you can actually rule out all the other questions you have just by asking that question.
Wow.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Infant baptism dating.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's one question.
That's it.
Well, there you go. And then so part 2 was then I had a number of scaled questions that I would rate on a sort of 1 to 10 scale.
Okay.
Which is like, so my questions specifically were, how well did I enjoy our conversation? How well do our personal lifestyles and hobbies match? How physically attracted am I to her? How much would I like to meet her? And how much would she like to meet me?
This is all before you meet.
No, this is after the first date.
So the last question, ask that question again and put it in context.
How much do I think she would like to meet me again?
Again. Okay.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay.
So this is after the first date. I'm sort of you're thinking retrospective to the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how did it go? Were we compatible? Did we sort of just like bounce off of each other? How was just our interaction?
So not disagreeing again, but suppose it was an off night.
Sure.
So are you going to disqualify that person for an off night? I mean, I know people when they date, they usually put their best foot forward.
Right.
That's kind of the nature of it. But if they're having a bad day, if this isn't a good time, or if there's also the factor of imposter syndrome, the whole dating process is designed to sift through what you present yourself to be to what you really are.
Right.
And so I'm trying to I'm not curious as to what you think you are that you wish you were, but you're not and you want to be. So you imitate poorly and try to convince me until I find out later it's not true. It's I want to know the real you. And some people struggle to present or even understand who they are, let alone present it in a way that's confident. So how do you, because in your scoring system, you could literally disqualify somebody who's having a bad night. And you could score highly somebody who's a good faker.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, these questions, they are very much a sort of customizable thing, but basically,
sure.
The main thing I intended to do with them, and again, customize for yourself, but the main thing I was intending to do was just like, is there some level of connection between the two of us?
And I don't want to make that process more overly thought than need, but just identifying somebody who's going to flag that and go, well, hold on. Because you do want to know, did I enjoy our conversation? Like, if I did not enjoy talking to you, I probably would not want to live with you.
Yeah.
If you annoy me with your snorting laugh, I'm probably going to find that, if I find it annoying today, I'm probably not going to ever like it,
Yeah. And the thing is, like, there will always be times when, even if you're just going out on normal dates with people, where it could just happen that, you're a girl and the guy you go out with, he's just really awkward and nervous and he has a bad night, and then you're like, all right, we're not going to date. Like, it could always happen that you could accidentally miss someone. And so, like, take these questions with a little grain of salt, but sort of use them to think about it a little bit, and just be a helpful tool for, like, was there a there, or was it just sort of,
so what's your scoring system then?
So my scoring system was that, so 5 questions, 0 to 10. And then if it was a 0 to 20, that was something I considered a failure, probably not worth pursuing.
So they didn't get up to 20 points in your value system. It was like, next.
Yeah. Okay. If it's 21 to 34, that's maybe, but with a critical eye. If it's 35 to 50, that means there's a viable candidate to sort of be like, okay, there seems to be real interest here.
How'd you choose that number scale?
So that number scale was based off of the Pragmatist Guide to Relationships book. So we'll get to that book a little bit more later, but that's where the scale comes from. But again, adjust the scale to yourself. I was, just before I ended up finding my current girlfriend, I was actually thinking of readjusting the numbers just because of the way I scored. That particular scale was not useful because of the way my mind works. So again, adjust the numbers for yourself, but that sort of gives you a general ballpark.
And it's kind of, I'd say it's a tool, not a rule. That, like, if you fall into 0 to 20, fail next, it's not like, oh, you got to move on. It's like, no, they may have had that bad night, but let me just give them another chance. Let's try out a second date.
Did you come up with that phrase? It's a tool, not a rule?
I did.
Wow. I'm going to use that. That's good.
Trademark. You can't use it.
I'm going to use it.
You owe me $5 every time you say it.
No, I give you credit the first time. The second time I'll say somebody said, the third time it's mine. Yeah, that's how it works.
Deal.
Things I've stolen from other thieves. Okay.
Yeah. So for sure, like, if it's like, even though I feel like objectively it wasn't great, I feel like there's something really there, and I feel like if I just poke a little bit, it might come out. Poke a little bit.
Yeah, and you can overcome your own.
Yeah, for sure. Don't be like, well, the rule says it, so I guess I'm stuck.
But this is a way to get yourself some objectivity too, because emotions can play in, your own emotions, your own expectations, all the factors. So this gives you some objectivity, but it also forces you to put value on very specific things, which is really helpful. Otherwise, you're kind of spitballing it, feeling your way through. Yeah,
there's a reason that, like, physical attraction is only one of the 5 things, because especially for guys, if you show up and she turns out to be super hot, you're like, well, we're going on a second date, you guys. And
interesting.
Everything else scored terribly, but you were like, but she's really hot though.
But she'd get a 10 on that.
Yeah, she'll get a 10 on the hotness, but like if she has nothing else, it'll help give you the objectivity of like, okay, I'm just thinking about it because she's very attractive. Maybe this isn't a good idea.
Yeah, that's good. I see this. This is good. Yeah. Okay.
And so then part 3 is just like your personal notes, your observations, your biographical facts.
So this is all about your notebook. You're writing all this in your notebook.
Yes, this all goes into a notebook. So put the heading of like,
is she against infant baptism? How hot is she? Write it all down.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 questions you need.
That's all. That's all you need.
Yeah. Just extract the two worst questions and only answer those and ignore everything else and all the context. Yes, do that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So part 3 is helpful. And like, for me, it's just very helpful sometimes to write, to think things out, but like, write your observations about her. Be like, oh, the conversation did this. She mentioned this interesting thing. If we meet a second time, I think this is something I want to follow up on. This was interesting. This was concerning. This was good. This was bad. And that just sort of helps you evaluate and like write it down and have it all there in front of you, as opposed to like swirling chaotically in your mind. And again, this works very well for me because I like writing things down, and this helps me and a lot of other people think. And so you put all that down, and then you have like, okay, this is sort of my evaluation of, Jane Smith or John Smith that I went out on the date today with. Now I can evaluate it and be like, do I want to go on a second meeting with them or not?
But you're doing this for 3 people a week.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of writing.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
One of the things I would suggest is I did this on a Word document. It's much easier to type than it is to write.
You can do it on your phone. You can do it on Notes
sure, of
app,
course,
something like that.
Whatever. But
initial thoughts, things to follow up on.
You're putting a lot of effort into this.
But you're also writing down concerns as well.
Yeah, of course. Right. Like both the things you liked and the things you were like, oh, this is a yellow flag I need to follow up on.
So what would be an example of a yellow flag to follow up on?
So one of the most common ones for Christians will be, is the guy I'm dating a culture Christian or an actual Christian?
That's good. Okay.
Like that's one of the key ones that is very easy for someone to be like, oh, I go to church, I like the Bible, blah, blah, blah.
Let me throw one in there that might be common, but more like if I understand what you're saying, childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So childhood trauma, or adopted, came out of grew up in a pastor's home. There's trauma. But just different things like that would account for what you see, but also going, have you worked through that?
Yeah.
Have you been through certain, things like, take me through that process.
Yeah.
As you get deeper, you might not talk about it on the first date, but you tuck that away to go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if this progresses, if that conversation gives us a new starting point to talk about more deep stuff.
And biographical facts are also particularly very helpful because biographical facts would just be like, oh, this is my sister. This is the name of my cat. This is the pet I had as a kid, blah, blah, blah.
You would date a girl with a cat?
Everyone's allowed one deviation, okay?
Thought I lost you there. So, okay. All right. I'm like, they're turning off this podcast now. Okay. No, this is good. Okay. So you're asking meaningful stuff that might sound just interesting or trivial, but could be surfacing something that's really necessary.
Yeah. And biographical details are also helpful because if you do end up dating this girl, if you go from meetings to actually going steady and making it official and all that, then, it's nice to be like, despite the fact that I met a lot of other people, I remember the things you told me. And, I know
showing interest.
Yeah. I know the name of your parents. I know the name of your cat. I know whatever.
I just want to know, what do you think gives you the right to use the phrase going steady if you're a Zoomer? Because that's a phrase from my generation. That's
a phrase from the 50s, actually. Which I think is before your generation?
Yes, in fact, it was woefully before my generation. It was so long ago. Okay. But define that.
Going steady.
Yeah.
It's what the Zoomers, I suppose, would call making it official.
Okay.
And going exclusive, as the terms were.
I think that's the word, is you and I are exclusively not spending time with intentionally anybody else on. Yeah. Now we're testing the waters for marriage?
Yep.
Would you say that? Okay.
Yeah. Going steady is basically you have moved past, I love Braden's phrase, testing the waters for dating to testing the waters for marriage.
Yeah, that's good.
You have okay, I think there's real promise here. Let's officially become boyfriend and girlfriend. Let's go steady and see if we're going to get married or not. Okay.
All right. Because different people might have different things. That triggered something in me where I'm like, I went steady in junior high because that was we skated together on the slow skate at the skating rink. That's what we're going steady now. And each of us got those
skate at the skating
suicide slushies. You know what I'm talking about? One of every flavor in the slushie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
we call that the graveyard.
The graveyard. Yeah. So you don't want to go
had one of those because I'm a square.
Well, see that there. Nicely played. But terms are important. And we're also trying to, on this podcast, avoid saying that because some people hear going steady and they hear courtship. Mm-hmm. They hear an overactive involvement with somebody else who's chaperone-like. And I mean, just we're not ever advocating here for a process as one above another. There are multiple processes that can get you to the place that still honor God's word.
Yeah. And, before we go further, I should note very briefly that the most common objection you will have to this sort of dating notebook thing is that this feels very cold. This feels very objectifying. This feels like you're just rating people like you're rating a car at a car dealership.
Okay.
And sort of the reason is, and we've talked about this a little bit already, but the thing is what you're doing is you're playing your own matchmaker. In these early dates, as Braden said, testing the waters for dating, you're testing to see, is there something here to date or not? So you're, the Orthodox Jews have this thing called the Shadchan.
I've seen this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, recently, wasn't there a Netflix show or something about that? About Jewish dating? Anyway.
I just watched them when I was in Israel and when I was in Jerusalem. It happened everywhere and I was trying to get close enough to hear what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. while they're being overseen. Just explain how it goes.
Yeah. So what this matchmaker will do, what the shotgun will do is like, he'll have like a large filing cabinet full of files from all the guys, and he will talk to the guys, he will interview them, he will get a questionnaire, he'll get a bunch of info on them. He'll have a large filing cabinet full of a bunch of women that he has talked to and interviewed and gotten info on. He will find people who he thinks their files match up, he'll pair them up, they'll go on a date. Jews have a bunch of very strict rules about like, you can't even hold hands, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point is they'll go on a date. They'll come back to him and they'll say either, yes, this worked out, this is great, we're going to pursue it. Or they'll say, it didn't work out, I didn't like the guy.
They'll come back and go, well, the next step is the next date. So it's not just like, yes, it's good, we're going steady now.
Yeah.
It's like date 2. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He'll walk them through the whole process. But if they come back and one or the other both say, I wasn't really feeling it, he'll take the files back and put them back in the file cabinet, and he'll try again, and he'll try again, and he'll try again. What you are doing is
the same thing.
The same thing for yourself. Unfortunately, we do not have this Shadchan system, which honestly, some parts of it sound kind of awesome. Like the systematicity with which you can have a professional help walk you through this who has studied in theology and in relationships. Yeah. Sounds lovely. But we don't have that. So you're doing it yourself. You're doing a Kirkland brand Shadchan is what you are.
That's awesome. Awesome. I know exactly every word you just said was amazing. I love you, Ernest. Keep going.
You know, I'm crazy, but this is the system, boys.
Okay.
And so, and the other thing too is like the reason I pressed doing so much of this early on is in a way, and for you guys specifically, this is also to be a point of chivalry, that it is your job to protect the heart of the woman you go out on a date with.
Thank you.
If you can find out something that is a deal breaker on the second date, don't wait until 3 months into the relationship where you're going to have to shatter her heart to do it.
Right.
Do it on the second date and find out, oh, we've got this deal breaker. All right, well, it was nice to meet you, and that's it.
Right.
And she's fine, and no one's heart is broken, and nothing stupid happens, and there's no tears because you did it on the second date.
Right.
So doing all of this allows you to sort of filter very heavily and not accidentally get into something where suddenly there's a deal breaker, but now there's broken hearts and tears and all the rest of it.
Well, if you were to define the word decision, what is a decision? That is your ability to get to yes or no as quickly as possible, with the greatest potential of success and eliminating risk. That's what a decision is. Getting to yes or no. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let's get to yes or no. Yeah. And different people take different routes to get to yes or no, but the goal is to get to yes or no.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that you've got sort of your notebook, where do you find these candidates to put into your notebook, which is where you talk about all of the different places you can go dating. So I'm going to tell you the most crazy one and then 4 more normal ones.
Okay. All right.
The most crazy one is this website called Keeper AI.
Keeper AI.
So Keeper AI is in fact a matchmaking online dating app. So this one set out to solve the dating problem by restructuring the payments so that they do not make money from you being subscribed. They only make money when you get into a relationship. And once you're in a relationship, then you go back and pay them. So they're actually incentivized to get you in a relationship, not just keep you subscribed to the website. Wow. But here's the way it works. You will sign up for the website. They have a really long, detailed questionnaire. You'll fill it out. You will then get on a Zoom call with one of their relationship counselors, and they'll interview you for about 30 minutes to an hour, going through the answers of your questionnaire that you filled out, being like, give me more details on this. I'm curious about this. You said this. What does that mean? What are you looking for? Okay. And you'll fill out all of this information.
So there's an individual that's actually doing this. It's not an algorithm at that point.
It's both. So it's AI assisted because they work internationally. So they've got, hundreds of thousands or whatever profiles. So it's AI assisted, but every match, once the AI says like, oh, I think this is a good pairing, they will personally review it first before they match you. So it's AI assisted, but it's human decided.
Okay, that's interesting.
But here's the thing. So you pay $100 for the initial sign up, and then it's just running in the background, and they're looking for people, and they're sorting, so on and so forth. But this is the part that is crazy. Because of the intensity of effort they put into it, when you get into a relationship, the amount you pay them, at least the amount they quoted me at the time, was $5,000.
Okay, so how, because I'm just envisioning somebody going, all I need is that point of contact, and then if we get in a relationship, then I just don't tell Keeper AI that I'm doing it.
You just lie to them. You say that like it didn't work out, and then you're fine.
Yeah, and then you just go get married and spend the $5,000 on a cool honeymoon in Cancun or something.
So, first of all, don't lie. That's bad.
That's always bad.
But second of all, I did talk to them a little bit about this, and they do have basically they have a couple of different because both you and the whoever the partner is are talking to two separate people, they have a couple of different ways to effectively verify. And at least they've said that they have not had, because I asked them about this exact question. I was like, won't people just like lie to you? And apparently it seems to be the case that whatever systems they have in place are pretty good and they don't have a high drop-off rate and they're financially viable. So I never tested those systems. And
okay.
While I got a couple of pings off of them, none of them turned into any actual dates, but it's worth a shot. Pay them the $100, do it, and have that running in the background. Because if you find a candidate match from there, it will likely be a very high quality one. And again, it's $5,000, but you will spend $50,000 or more on college. So it's not a crazy amount.
No, it's not. Okay. All right. So that's interesting. Now, one of the things that I would note is as soon as you go on one of these sites, they're all like, here's a woman. I'm on the site now. Here's a woman in a wedding gown with her wedding flowers. Right. Here's a guy kissing on the neck of a girl. There's people in poses that are clearly romantic, nothing erotic, nothing here that's inappropriate, but clearly like the intent is I'm clicking on this because I want the person in the picture to be me. So they're, as a believer who's walking into a place where they're going, I'm trying to test the waters for dating. But what I'm being confronted and presented with is the ideal happy couple that I wish I was, but this is a tool that I'm hoping will get me to be what I see on the screen. So there is still a level of caution.
Sure.
That, okay, I'm realizing I'm walking into the algorithm. I'm walking in to take advantage of that. I still need to be ever watchful that there are places all along the way that I'm going to be told visually or explicitly, this is the goal. So anyway, okay.
Yeah, just remember, like social media, the images you see on here are faked to elicit specific emotions from you.
Okay, so I'm slowing you down from where you're trying to get. So finding candidates.
Then after Keep Your AI, you also have, there are in-person matchmaking services. I only found out about this right before I ended up finding my girlfriend Taylor. So I never got to try these, but most large cities will apparently have in-person matchmaking services.
No, I know people who do these, and they're very, very concierge, depending on the level of candidate you want and the amount of money they make and what kind of car they drive, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So that's another thing to try out. Now, the more normal ones will be leverage your friends and family and your networks. Like tell your parents, tell your siblings, tell your friends, hey,
tell your pastor.
Thank you. That like, hey, I'm looking for
chopped liver over here. Forget about it.
I was considering you in the friends category.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah,
that's so sweet.
It's safe. Liar.
And so you tell these people and you're like, hey, if you meet a nice girl and you think we'd be a good match, get our phone numbers together. Ask, see if she's interested. And,
that's good.
Ask for friend networks to help you with that. My parents helped me with one. It didn't work out for like a million reasons, but like I was very appreciative for the fact that like they took the initiative and they stepped out and they found this girl and they connected us and we went out for a little bit and it didn't work, but. Again, leverage your friend and family networks. Those historically were the biggest place where you would find marriage candidates, was that place. So do that.
That's natural.
Yeah. And then, of course, one of the other things you can do is, so don't abandon your church, but go to another good church that has a larger midweek church group. So this was something that I would do where... there was another church and they had a large young adults group, which had a lot of roughly, 20 something kids going to it.
Sure.
And I was like, perfect. I will go there on Thursday nights and that will be a place where, first of all, I can just get fellowship and I can talk with them and make friends. And I have been meaning to go back because I did in fact make friends there, but it is also a place that you can find other girls, other guys that you can consider dating.
Have you heard any success stories about that?
So you can't see me smiling, but that's how I met my fiance. A friend invited me to a young adults group. At first, I didn't even really want to go. I was like, it'll be good. It's a good group. And that's where I met her.
Yep.
Yeah. So it works.
Yeah.
It does work.
It does. So that's the closest you can simulate to going to another church without actually abandoning your church. So do that.
It's good.
And then, of course, the one you're all wondering about, online dating, do that. And we will, in a little bit, get into all of the details of how to war against the algorithms and smash them and break them to do your will instead of their own bidding. But before we do that, for all of the young men out there who don't have a lot of riz and kind of have no idea how attraction works. Very briefly, a couple of things that will be helpful. All of these things will be in the show notes. So there's a video called Zones V3, the most useful relationship map in history. So it's by a channel called HoMath, which, as you can tell by the title of the channel, is a kind of not great as a channel. Most of his other videos are kind of terrible and sort of misogynistic and not great. So don't watch them. This one, though, is pretty good, despite the fact that it is somewhat, red pill and objectifying and reductionistic. It is not that bad, and it is so useful for clueless young men that I would still recommend it. Just watch it again with a grain of salt. And the key point which he talks about, and he breaks into it in more detail, obviously, is that like there are two things that women are looking for in attraction. It is not just niceness, it is also competence, right? Like if you're nice, you're very trustworthy, but if you're just nice, then it's like, oh, well, you're a lovely friend. And then you get friend zoned, which is the worst.
Terrible spot to be in.
Nobody likes getting friend zoned, because the other thing they're looking for is not just niceness, it's competence and confidence. Are you someone who can competently provide for her?
Right.
And like who she looks at and she's like, he is someone I could actually follow and do well following. That's the other thing that you're missing. If you are just nice and loyal and you do not have the competence to back that up, then you get friend zone, and that's very depressing.
Well, and a woman is made for security. Yes. She wants security in her leader. That's God's innate design.
Yeah, and if you're trying to attract a godly woman, you got to be a godly man. If you want a godly woman who's going to wants to be with the leader, you got to be that leader, right?
Yeah. And actually this gets into the other video, which is also from Basecamp. Women prefer submissive roles, but not in the way you think. So this is a sort of antidote to the red pill. So the red pills will say that women prefer submissive roles in that you have to be this macho man alpha and treat them like a doormat, and that they want to be doormats and slaves. And this is like, no, this is not true. They touch on a little bit of a truth, but of course they twist it a bunch, which is the truth is that like, yes, women want to be, right, like again, creation roles to be submissive, but they want to be submissive in that they see a man who is a good leader, who pursues God well, who pursues something greater than himself, and who they can say, that is an ideal that I can get behind and pursue with him.
Yes.
And this video from Basecamp will sort of walk you through what that means.
Okay.
So if you are the kind of person who is like, I keep saying that like women want to be submissive, does this mean they want to be doormats? It doesn't, and this video is a very helpful antidote to that. Just realize again, Basecamp, they're not Christians, so they will talk about evolutionary psychology. Just replace the terms evolutionary psychology with the biblical idea that like men and women are individuals and subject to differential temptations. And then the video is pretty useful.
Okay. All right. Good.
So
let's talk about personal branding.
Yeah. So you get a little bit through the sort of like that's your like basics of attractiveness, and then like so personal branding and niche definition, which is what I called it in the outline, is specifically that like you're not trying to be kind of attractive to everyone. You want to be maximally attractive to a specific subset of people. So
okay, so let's stop on something here.
Yeah,
because there's two things. One, it's absolutely okay to do work on the outside, right? Because that's I mean, you're talking about things like self-care. Yeah, or you're talking about the kind of person you want to appeal to and attract. What do you mean?
So what I mean is basically that like you want to. How do you say? You want to accentuate who you are in a way that will attract the people who want to be with you. Okay. So
now the caveat to that, of course, is Proverbs 31: charm is deceitful and beauty is vain.
Right.
Right. With the one who fears the Lord. Yeah. Right. So that's got to be ultimate here.
To be sure.
But for a person, you have to be, Song of Solomon, you have to be attracted to the person.
Yeah.
Like he was over the moon for her and her for him. So there's no question, like that attractiveness piece is vital.
Yes.
It's absolutely vital.
Yeah. I think that kind of goes back to the competent too, that like he's a man that is able to take care of himself. Like he doesn't just look like a homeless person and smell bad all the time, right? You know, brushes his teeth. He knows how to dress too, right?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to pick on Elijah while he's not here.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Elijah.
But so what I mean here, so I'll use myself as a personal example.
Yeah.
So like so this is why getting back to that, why I have the Harry Potter glasses.
Tell us.
So like when I got these glasses, my parents were like, "Why didn't you get like normal people glasses?" And it's like because I'm leaning into if I got like whatever cool normal glasses that like gym bros wear or whatever, I don't know.
Gym bros.
If I did that, that would have just would not have fit who I am, and it would have made me look like a poser. So I leaned into who I am, which, as you can hear from this podcast, is a giant nerd.
No, you're not. No, well, and nerd has a whole stigma of stuff like. But the point, you're not going to give into some imposter syndrome. You're going to be confident in who God's made you to be, who you are, and you're going to love that. And the person that loves you will love you for you.
Right, and so that's the thing. So you wear the Harry Potter glasses to sort of visually accentuate, this is who I am. I want you to understand that. And again, because dating apps are so visual focused, and we'll get into that in a bit, it's like, it's helpful to sort of give visual cues of your personality as much as you can.
Okay.
And so, for my younger brother is incredibly fit. He spends a lot of time at the gym. I would not tell him to dress like I did or to wear Harry Potter glasses.
That would be a mismatch. That'd be a total contradiction. Yeah.
I would tell him,
that's a good point.
Yeah, you're the kind of guy who, take a photo of yourself at the gym working out, looking buff, because that's where you've excelled. That's where you look good.
Because that's who you are also.
And so, like, whether whether you've got that sort of more nerdy scholastic archetype, or you've got the like jock archetype, or you're like the creative artist type, lean into the personality of who you are.
Yeah, that's good. I agree with that. Absolutely.
And the other thing, what you want to do is what's called in economic terms, arbitrage, which is, so here's the thing.
I'm getting a whole like vocabulary to arbitrage.
Yeah. And basically what arbitrage is you look for places that are differentially valuable and you chase those. So
okay, you got to explain that.
Yeah. So what I mean is, say you are, say you're at a market, at a seaside market buying fish.
Okay.
And there's this one fish that everyone thinks tastes terrible, but you love the taste of it.
Okay.
If you are buying fish, you should specifically buy that fish, not the normal fish, because it will be cheaper and provide you higher value.
Okay.
And so the way to translate this to dating is, and listeners, this is how much I care about you, because I'm going to embarrass myself slightly for the good of you all, which is that, like, so the arbitrage play here is that, like, I kind of like watching anime, and among Christians,
nerd.
Yep. Among Christians, that is a very big thing. Like, a lot of Christians will look at it and feel like that's just animated Japanese porn. It's not. Some of it can be, but a lot of it isn't. But anyway, I like it a little bit. I've seen probably something in the ballpark of like a dozen shows since my friends introduced me to it back in high school. And so, like, the thing is, putting that on my dating profile, you would think, like, that's bad, because a bunch of Christians are going to be driven away by it, because they're going to see anime and they're going to be like, nah, I don't want it. But the reason you put it on there is because it's differentially valuable.
Okay, so before you go further, just while you're on the stigma piece, now, as one who doesn't watch anime, I've been to Japan, so I'm not drawn to anime. You just used the word anime and porn. So I don't want you to draw me a picture. I'm not saying that, but what exactly is the stigma, and why would you choose then, if people think of anime and porn, why would you choose to make that connection, which would drive people perhaps unnecessarily away?
Right. So here's the reason why. So the reason the stigma is there because there are some shows that are just incredibly explicit and terrible. Think like, your HBO shows where there's just nudity all the time in a show. Okay. Yeah, some shows are, and then some shows are not, and some shows are very clean. And like, those are the ones I watch, obviously. But the reason I am doing this thing where that has a stereotype among some people that it's like, oh, this is this sort of like debauched Japanese television, is because it's differentially valuable, so that the girls who do watch anime will be differentially attracted, because they're like, oh, I know this is a guy that if I tell him I watch anime, he's a Christian that's not going to freak out.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. The nuance in that matters. So what you're saying is you're drawing attention to those things that are unique and eccentricities for you. Yes. That help you separate in the minds of other people something that is more distinctive. Like, let me give you a clearer picture of Earnest. Earnest, this will help you frame and inform who he is. Right. But you also have to explain what you're not at the same time too.
And let me sort of flip that. Like, if you were a non-Christian, if I was a non-Christian dating, I would not put my interest in anime on the profile, because among non-Christians, it's such a normal thing. It's like saying you like pizza. Okay, that tells me nothing about you. That is not an eccentricity. That is an arbitrage opportunity that's differentially valuable, it's pointless. So within your particular niche and subculture, find those things that are those arbitrage plays, and then put them in your profile. And
I want to put the words arbitrage and differentially valuable together in the same sentence. Thank you.
I think there was some of them if you just replace the period with a semicolon.
Yeah,
but
good.
anyway, of course, the other thing too is what this does is this: if there is a girl who's like, oh, I kind of like this guy, but she would hate it if she found out I watched anime, then great, we're just not matched for each other, and we don't have to spend the time going for a first meeting, blah blah blah.
But that also surfaces, okay, if that's going to be that much of a deal breaker to you,
right?
Like, okay,
then it's going to be a deal breaker probably, because I'm going to be like, I think it's fine to watch some of the shows, and if you, and what that does is specifically that sorts for high what's called trait openness on your sort of personality scale, where it is like someone who is, if you are like me, you are open. I am open to like a very sort of broad band of like the information I'm willing to consume and then filter through the filter of Christ. Some people have a much narrower one, and that's fine, right? Like some people are like, I just want the stuff that I know is good. I don't want to go to secular sources and risk getting polluted. Fair enough. But then like, you and I, we're just not going to be a good match for each other, because I do spend a lot of time reading secular sources to help inform, and like I will filter through and I will use that to help provide more information and data when I'm making decisions. And so like, it serves multiple purposes, but the point is like, when you're putting in this information, you want to arbitrage play like that. You want to use specific information that can help you accentuate who you are and draw the ones who would like that and push away the ones who wouldn't.
I never would have thought to do that.
Yeah. I think that totally helps you to be authentic, because you don't want to just put on a fake image of who you are and the things that you like. That's good.
And then, of course, very briefly on just like general attraction, of course, like obviously things like, if you are overweight, losing weight will help you. If you are not great at your dress, ask someone who knows how to dress well. Ask young women in your church, give me your opinions on how to dress. I don't know how to dress. I've been dressing in shorts and t-shirts my whole life because that's what I grew up with, but I would like to dress better. Like, get opinions. It's not a bad thing to clean yourself up and to present yourself confidently.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
And, things like, there are some things you can't change, obviously, like height. And, sometimes the red pill people will be like, women, they're so just incredibly skin deep and all they care about is height and blah, blah, blah. And first of all, that's not really true. But second of all, to the extent that that is true, let me reverse it for a second to be just a tiny bit crass. Girls like a tall guy, like guys like a girl with a substantial bust, shall we say. Like, people find attractive things attractive. If you're going to get annoyed at women because that's the case, that's just reality. People find attractive things attractive.
Yeah, and I know that as a dad of daughters, but also, I mean, how much because I have tall daughters, because both my wife and I are fairly tall.
Yeah.
So if there's a scrawny little squirt that they're towering over, that creates a sense of insecurity, for them that shouldn't be a deal breaker, and it's not.
Right.
But there's a level of which that does factor in.
Yeah, and it's just like,
but it's preferential stuff.
Yeah, just like be conscious that like preferences are real, and insofar as some of them are changeable, like you can lose weight, or you can dress better, or you can have better hygiene. Do those, and just don't fall into the red pill trap of becoming bitter that people have preferences for things they do and don't find attractive.
Well, and they're going to make decisions about you based on externals quickly, and externals aren't the ultimate measure, but there are certain externals that are. We do this all the time. I was telling my daughter about a situation in seminary, one of our first days in seminary class. Just to take it out of the dating context for a second, the prof was talking about how you dress, and he says, here's what we're going to do. He had an envelope on his desk. We didn't know this at the time. He had an envelope on his desk for the people that he would say would be chosen as the class president and the class vice president. He had their names already written down. And he says, hey, we need, for the sake of organization, we need a class president, a class vice president. So this is our first day class. We're going to pick. Everybody's got blank seconds to stand up. Tell us about who you are. You're going to write the name down. You're going to pick the person who's going to lead you in this year. Okay, go. Boom. This is in seminary. And go through everybody, blah, blah, blah. They give the names of the people. He opens up his letter and pulls out the names that were chosen. Ooh. And they're like, how did you know? He said,
he has the gift of prophecy.
No, he doesn't.
He's a magician.
That's right. No, because this is a cessationist seminary. He said, it's the two best dressed people in the room.
Really?
You guys chose the two best dressed people in the room.
That makes sense.
To lead you.
Yeah.
You know nothing about their character. You know nothing about their leadership. You know nothing about their provenness, their history. You know what they said at a glance. And what you did is made a decision, whether you realize it or not, as conscious as you think you are about the things that are most weighty and eternal and consequential and spiritual. You made a decision based on all your externals.
Yeah.
So people judge that. They measure that. And that's okay to acknowledge that that's a reality. Yeah, just be aware of that. So, but that is the thing.
Right.
Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. But the woman in Proverbs 31, she dressed herself in scarlet.
Right.
You know, she wasn't walking around a potato sack all day long. She's not some haggardly Cinderella for whom the bell had tolled. She was conscious of self-care.
Yeah. So, you know, men dress well. Women, I don't have to tell you this because they seem to have a much better innate sense of like how to just dress well. But both men and women realize that like while someone who is sloppily dressed can be competent and someone who is well dressed is not competent, just take that as a signal, but not the only signal.
Yeah, right.
It's just a helpful indicator.
It's a tool, not a rule. Yeah. See what I did there?
Look at that.
Yeah.
And look at our sweet callbacks. All right.
You gotta credit me.
That was one.
Okay.
So now we get to the most exciting part, the specifics of online dating. So we've gone through all of the general stuff and your notebooks and your findings and all of your, so like, how do you date online? So as of 2024, the best apps are Hinge by a country mile, followed afterwards by Upwards and Bumble. The thing is, which apps are the best changes from year to year. So while that's true now, if you're listening to this in 2025, 2026, whatever, this may no longer be true. So I want to give you the principles for figuring out which dating app is good, which is, there are three main things. Number one, the most important one, is you want to be allowed to do pre-match messaging. So on most dating apps, you have to send a like to the girl and the girl has to send a like to you and you have to match before you can send her a message. Upward is the only one of the apps that I know of that allows you to send a message before she likes you. And so even if she hasn't liked you, you can send her a message. And this will be very key to the way that you can approach. And I feel like you're about to say something.
No, I'm listening. In fact, what I'd like to do is I'm going to shut up because I would like you to just walk through this. This is actually fascinating material. Keep going.
Yeah. So that's number one. You want, it is the most important thing, have pre-match messaging. Secondly, check the gender ratio. They don't release these publicly, but you can find pretty good indicators where if you just poke around online, you will be able to find the gender ratio of how many men to women are on the app. So things like Hinge and Upward are something like 60-40 majority men. Something like Tinder, I think, is 70-30 majority men. So obviously, if there are way more men, you're going to have a worse time of it. Right. So
interesting.
Find one that has a more balanced gender ratio. And then, of course, you want to look for just the general culture reputation, right? Like Tinder is well known for being the hookup app. So probably that's not the place.
Stay off that because that's what they're coming there for.
That's what they're coming there for. But
is there a Christian version?
Yeah, so Upward is specifically Christian.
Upward is Christian.
Upward is a Christian swipe-based dating app.
What about Christian Mingle?
So I actually tried Christian Mingle.
Did you really?
I tried everything. I tried Match, eHarmony, Christian Mingle, and then all of the dating apps.
What about, is there Plenty of Fish?
Plenty of Fish, tried that, wasn't very good.
Okay.
That's really an app? Plenty of Fish.
Wasn't that a Christian one?
I don't think so.
Just lots of fish in the sea, is that kind of the idea?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's probably
I think that was the one where a trans person matched me. So,
oh, wow.
It was either that one or Coffee Meets Bagel where a trans person matched me.
Oh, that's frightening.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Is there one called Christian Tingle? I don't know.
Probably.
Okay. All right. If not, we should start an ISW app, Christian Tingle. Sorry.
It's like if Spider-Man became a Christian.
That's right. Exactly. My spidey senses are tingling.
Yeah. But so, yeah, you want to look for one with a good culture and reputation. So Hinge tends to have a reputation of being a little more serious. So that's good. Bumble a little bit as well. And of the three, Bumble was the worst. And I was thinking of actually ending my subscription right before I found Taylor. And then I ended my subscription for all of them, obviously. But those are the three. That's what you're looking for on the apps. And then on all of these apps, because again, they're all clone stamps of each other because they are no longer competing to get you married. They're just competing to keep you on the app. Pay for the subscription. Okay. So the subscription, which is usually like, I don't know, $20-$30 a month or whatever, pay for the subscription on all of these apps, which will give you the ability to send unlimited likes, which is key to the strategy that I employed. As well as, again, if you're spending $50,000 on college, $30 a month on a dating app is not that much.
Can I ask a question real quick? I said I wouldn't interrupt you, but I lied.
Please.
Is there something said in the algorithm where the computer or the algorithm is paying attention to the kind of person you consistently like, so it's sending you more of that kind of person? Or is there any kind of rhyme or rule that you've discovered?
There is some, but we're gonna screw with the algorithm anyway, so that doesn't particularly matter.
Okay, good. All right.
A lot of it's based on radius too, like 25 miles from where I live or 50 miles.
Okay.
Yeah. But while you do want to pay for premium, don't pay for all of these apps will have something like on Hinge, it's called Roses, on Upwards, it's called Super Like, I forget what it's called on Bumble. But these are things that they say like, oh, if you like a girl with this quote super like, that it will go to the top of her list. And so she will see it sooner.
Okay.
From the investigation I did and from the testing that I have run, they are basically worthless.
Yeah,
you will
just
pay
spending money.
Yeah, you will pay them like $50 for like 20 super likes. So they are like $2 each, and they will be basically worthless. Don't waste your money on those.
Okay.
Usually if you have a premium, they will give you like a free super like a month or whatever. Go ahead and just use that on a particularly good profile if you come across it, but know that it's
going to be inconsequential.
Yeah, basically inconsequential. So now let's talk about, so you've got your apps. Now let's talk about building your profile.
Okay.
So first of all, get professional photos, no exceptions. Gentlemen, absolutely no exceptions. You will get professional photos. I demand this of you if you're using dating apps.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm already married, so I'm out, but
yeah. Ladies, it will probably be helpful, but for you, and again, on part 5, we'll talk about stuff specific for women, it will be much less necessary. So while it's recommended, if you don't, you'll be fine.
So why are you so strong on this for men?
So the reason is because of the differential way that men and women swipe on dating apps and the fact that women get hundreds of likes, you have to maximize your standoutness in as many ways as you can. One of the ways you can stand out is by having better photos. If everyone else is sort of just like the random selfie they took on a Tuesday,
right,
and you have a well-groomed and well-taken care of photo that catches attention and that helps to, again, accentuate who you are by like, when you take these photos, take them thoughtfully. So one of the things you will do on the photos is, again, dress for your personality. So when I took my photos on the dating app, I took a number of them with like the suit and bow tie that I wear at work.
Which is very iconic for you.
It's very iconic. And again, because I'm a sort of scholastic nerdy type, with my Harry Potter glasses and my bow tie, I look the part of my personality. And so you lean into your personality and that helps become eye-catching. So as they're going through a bunch of profiles and they're looking and looking and looking, they're like, oh, that's different. They're looking at a bunch of random guys who, you know, are in t-shirts or whatever and who took a selfie. And suddenly they see a guy in a suit and bow tie. Oh, that's different. And that makes them pause and look at your profile. That's your first win. You've differentiated yourself from the pack. They're now looking at you.
So if you got clean shirt, new shoes, good haircut,
yep.
Then you got ZZ Top's song, "Cause Every Girl Crazy About a Sharp Dressed Man." So there really is something to that.
Yeah.
Gold watch, diamond ring, I ain't missing a single thing, cufflink, stick pin when I step out. Yeah, there we go. All right.
And again, like dress for your personality. So like, you know, I am not I'm a nerd, but like if you were like my younger brother, you're a very buff jock kind of guy. Like take a picture of yourself at the gym, or like take a picture of yourself, shirtless at the beach, or playing volleyball or whatever. Like do the things that accentuate who you are.
Right.
Like if you're a creative artist type, lean into that. Take some pictures with you painting whatever you do as your art or whatever.
That's good.
And then a couple of just like useful, a couple of useful small things. If you have access to a dog or cat, like one of your friends has a dog or cat, pet photos get a lot of engagement. So those could be helpful. Take a photo with a cute puppy. That's very useful.
Even if you don't have one or own one?
Just say that you were over, which would be true, that you were over at your friend's house. And
I was over at my friend's house when this professional photographer came up upon me and took this photo of me with my bow tie on.
To be clear, probably that one would just be your friend on his iPhone taking a picture of you. But if most of your photos are professional, for you can make exceptions for a thing like that. And then if you have a picture with your friends that you're going to be like, oh, again, because height matters and because these apps are so geared towards making you think in terms of visuals, you play into that to a certain extent. That like when you have a photo with friends, make sure you don't look short if you can avoid it.
Why?
Because, you know, again, women are instinctually attracted to height. And when they're trying to filter through hundreds of photos, they're using every metric they can. So if they're like, he seems off, they'll just swipe left. They won't think about it because they have so much to go through. So it's worth maximizing as much as you can, because you need to stand out from the million other likes they've gotten.
I'm still stuck on you holding a cat in a photo pic. I just have this. I can only look you in the eyes right now. I'm just trying to imagine you holding a cat.
I didn't actually get a pet photo for mine, but useful tips.
You didn't need it. Okay. Good.
But the thing is, what you want is, again, you want eye-catching and unique. So like my first photo, again, is that iconic bow tie suit shot.
Yeah.
But I also had a picture of me, like, I went to the Renaissance Fair with some friends. Braden, I think you were there that day, weren't you? But
I don't think I went with you. I think I went with a couple other people.
Oh, that's right. But I went there and we went into this costume shop and I dressed up in like this big gaudy pirate jacket and like I had a sword.
Fun.
And so a friend of mine, Elijah, actually, he took a picture of me like swinging the sword looking like some sort of piratical maniac. That was one of the photos I put on my dating profile because, again, it's very eye-catching. It's unique. It's something that sort of tells your personality of like, I am sort of a silly nerdy type.
It totally tells your personality. And knowing you like I do, that is totally your personality. It's fun. It's engaging. You enjoy life. You laugh a lot. There's an exuberance to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you want those sorts of eye-catching photos to quickly distinguish you. The other thing you will want to do is most of these apps will say something like, oh, let us auto sort your photos and we'll put the photos into whichever order gets, quote, the most engagement. Don't do that. Turn that off because you want to manually sort the photos the way you want so you can structure the way they're looking at you.
I got you.
Your first photo, you want it to be one of those iconic photos. Maybe it's that like pirate swinging a sword photo that I had, or maybe it's my bow tie photo, or it's something that is immediately unique and immediately differentiates you from all of the other guys.
So for Braden, it would be him clipping his toenails on the airplane photo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my Instagram profile photo.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, got it.
So that's what you have you get all of these professional photos taken. And then once you've got your photos, the other part, of course, is your, what do you put in your profile?
Okay.
Again, they constrain your word counts very heavily, but as much as you can, max out every single word count that they give you the opportunity to do, because you're trying as much as possible to tell about your personality. What this also means is don't waste time on superfluous stuff. So don't waste time saying that like controversial opinion, I like pineapples on pizza. That's a waste of time.
Unless it's a deal breaker for you.
If it's a deal breaker, put it on there. But if it's not, like say things core to your personality. I actually, with this, I don't worry, my girlfriend knew about this. I briefly re-downloaded my dating app so that I could pull up my profile and look at the things that I wrote. So
interesting.
So the first thing I put on there in the first text box is, of course, my religion, right? Like I'm a conservative Christian, and I quoted the first question of the Westminster Confession: "What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy Him forever."
Great.
And so, like, put that out front that like you are a Christian. But then the other things I put on the profile were things that are unique to you, that tell something about your own personality, and that are impressive in some way. So the next thing was like, what's your greatest strength? And my answer to that was that I have great emotional stability, because I have an unbridled confidence in my God that gives me an unshakable foundation for all of life.
Great.
Right? So like this tells you, so like for women, they're like, ooh, this is a guy who's emotionally stable. This is someone who's saying I can rely on him.
But this is also true of you, that everybody that knows you knows that's the best description, if we were to describe you, of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally, absolutely true. Well, and so you're not making it up, but you're giving language specific to help people, because how many people would look at that and go, I'm going to pass over that. Yeah, no, thank you.
Right.
Not interested in that.
Right. And then, so to be clear, like don't put fake things about yourself, but put those things about yourself that are most true and attractive to attract the kind of people you're looking for. And then the last thing I put on my profile was that I put that if you're a fan of, and I name dropped a couple of different things, Astro Codex 10, Simone and Malcolm Collins, and Impact Theory. These are three different blogs and media companies, basically blogs, books, media companies that I had, and I put them there, that it was like, if you know any of these three things, I guarantee you we're going to have a great conversation. Maybe we won't work for some other reason, but we're going to at least have an amazing conversation, and you and I are a match.
So did Taylor know any of those?
She didn't.
She did not, or did?
She did not.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a long shot, because all three of those things are a little bit niche, but I put that in there because it was like, if anyone knows those three names and then likes my profile, the chance that we're going to have a great time is through the roof. So like that one was a calculated risk. It didn't pay off, but it was a calculated and known risk because it's rare, but it's important enough that if it matches, it's worth the risk.
Yeah, but it's also the kind of thing where somebody would go, never.
Right.
So that would also help filter out the people that you would go, don't even stop here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then like one of the things that Hinge allows you to do is it allows you to put like a little survey question of like, here's 3 things, pick the one that we have in common.
Okay.
And so, you know, normally people will put just like random stuff about, oh, I don't know, I like this kind of pizza, or I cook this kind of food, or whatever. I put the 3 things I put were, again, intentional to say something about my personality. So it was like, what 3 things do we have in common? Number 1 was perpetually reading books. Again, leaning into that nerd archetype.
Okay.
Number 2 was my love of hiking, because I want to say that I am a nerd archetype, but that doesn't mean I only ever stay home and I've never seen the sun. And then number 3 was that I am a little bit of an anime nerd, right? Because, and that's where the anime thing comes in as, again, that differential arbitrage opportunity we talked about earlier.
That makes perfect sense. That totally makes perfect sense.
Yeah, just as you're writing, just intentionally structure everything, because your word counts are so constrained, to tell as much about you in as little space as you can.
So this is really practical stuff. This is really, really helpful stuff. Take us in the practical. I'm mindful of our time. Push us now to a place where we're not going to interrupt you, maybe just to adjust a couple things, but or ask a couple things. But take us through the no kidding. Okay, so if someone's persevered in this podcast at this point on, and they're going, I'm writing this down, I'm taking notes, this is really helpful. Give us then, what are those best practices for swiping, for messaging, for first dates? If you want to go steady, like all that, like take us through that. Yeah. And we're going to let you just kind of fly right now.
Okay. So, for swiping, you want to filter pretty lightly, and you want to put a large distance. I put typically 75 to 100 miles, which is like, that's an hour and a half drive. And it's like, again, second most important decision of your life. It's worth it. Go on those dates. If it is a good match, take it. And what you're doing is you're filtering very lightly. So basically what I put was, is she within age? Is she a Christian? And is she within distance? And I would swipe on every single one of those profiles. Reason being, because if someone doesn't check a box, so like for politics, I would never date someone who puts themselves as liberal, because we're just too extremely different on worldviews. Right. But the thing is, if you just ignore the politics question, you don't check a box, and I put only put in conservatives, then it's going to filter you out because you put nothing. So you don't want to put those filters, because it might accidentally filter out someone who just skipped the question. So you want to
see.
Yeah. And then the thing you will do is, when you first download the app, you will probably spend about 6 hours on it on the first day. Once you've finished your profile, swipe through every single profile that matches your light filters, until eventually you will hit the end. It will say there's no more profiles for you to see today. That means you have hit the end of the profile stack. That's what you want, because that means every day afterwards, you're doing daily maintenance for, say, 10 to 15 minutes of swiping to clear it out, because then what you're seeing are only those profiles that are the newest profiles. You're not being distracted by all of the old profiles, because you've cleared them all. And because you're daily clearing through the entire stack of profiles, you never have the thing where it's like, trying to optimize and show you, because you're looking at all of the available profiles.
So this you really have. I take back what I said earlier about like having figured it out. I retract my comments. You have figured it out. Okay, continue.
Yeah, and then so when you're swiping, so on the first day, it's just going to be a very long day. Again, it will probably take you several hours to go through all of them, even if you're going quick. Typically, you spend maximum 60 seconds on a profile. Basically, you look at it. It's like you look at it. You read through the things that she said, and then you decide if you like her or you don't. If you like something about her profile, when you send that message, send something unique to her. So if she talks about, I like long walks on the beach and I like microbiology, talk microbiology, not beaches.
Not the beach, because the beach is common.
The beach is common. Microbiology is something unique to her, and it let a girl nerd out. If she likes microbiology, there's a story behind that. If you know microbiology, ask her an interesting question and you're off to the races. If you don't, ask her, that's interesting, why microbiology? And that will probably tell you something interesting. And if she likes your profile at all, this gives her a place to converse. If you just send a like, there's nothing for her to engage with. If you send her a message, she's like, oh, it gives her a way to start, and it lowers the barrier and friction that she has to starting and meeting with you. If there is nothing to engage with, like you look at the profile and you're like, it's fine, but I don't have anything to say. You can send a like, that's fine. Just send a like and move on. But just realize that you've lowered your probabilities drastically if you don't send a message. Because so few guys do, that's the other thing. You're sending a message, again, differentiates you and puts you on top.
You're
because
on the top
most
of the
guys
pile.
Won't.
Okay.
So let's say you've swiped well, you do your daily clearings, and you start and you match with someone. So what do you do for messaging? What you want to do is you want to move from the hello to the first date as soon as humanly possible. Okay. So with Taylor, I did this in a total of 12 messages from when and so that was about 6 from me and 6 from her. 12 messages and we were talking about the logistics of how to meet. So you want to move that quickly. And what you're doing basically is and this was a mistake. So I call them campaigns because you almost treat them as like military campaigns. So I had my winter 23 campaign where I made a terrible mistake that was very penny wise and pound foolish, which was I thought like, well, taking out people on dates costs money and time and gas. So what I will do is I will match with them and I'll go on a phone call first. And then if the phone call goes well, then I'll take them on a date because I can do a lot of filtering through the phone call. The problem is if you do that, almost everyone is less charismatic over the phone than they are in person.
Interesting.
So you're going to get on the phone, you're going to talk with them, and then you're both going to feel like that wasn't very attractive, and you're going to meh. This is what happened to me in my Winter 23 campaign because I did the phone calls first. I got very little conversion to actual in-person dates. Once I switched to messaging and then just like, let's just go grab coffee. It will cost you a few dollars. It is worth it because then you are in person and you're much more charismatic and you can tell your whole personality and all your facial expressions.
You're not going to steak 44,
Right.
You can't have Riz over the phone.
Exactly. Thank you. You cannot have Riz over the phone. So do that very quickly. Now, sometimes, especially guys, the girls will want to have a date first, or a phone call first to make sure you're an axe murderer. If she does, that's fine. But just, you should be, your aim should be go on a date, only do a phone call if she asks. But if she asks, of course, that's fine. Do that.
Okay.
And so let's say like you're like me with Taylor, dozen messages in, you talk about logistics, you figure it out. So now you're going on your first date. For preparation and presentation, dress well. Ideally, if you can do it with an excuse, that means you can dress really well. So I would always do my dates at 5:30 after I got off from work.
Because you're already dressed up for work.
Because I'm already dressed up. So I would come there in a suit and tie. A lot of times I'd lose the bow tie, but I'd still come in my suit.
Yeah.
And so like if she comes dressed up, I'm dressed for the occasion. If she comes dressed down and she's like, oh, now I feel weird, I can just say, well, it's just because I came straight from work, which is true. So she doesn't have to feel awkward about it.
This guy.
Now, some of you won't have the opportunity to do that. If you can figure out some sort of excuse, use that. If you can't, just dress
like
well.
Someone once said it's like it's a tool, not a rule.
Yes, as some wise person said.
Who said that?
I don't know. He must have been real smart. And again, as with the photos, remember to choose an outfit that aligns with your personal brand. So whether that's a nerd or a relaxed creative type, dress well, but dress for your personality because that's who you are. And I had a very systematic dating plan. So my dating plan was always the same. I would take them to this one nice little coffee shop. We'd chat for about 30, 45 minutes. If I felt it was going well, I'd say, there's a restaurant about 2 blocks down the street. Do you want to walk with me over there and get dinner? This does 2 things. One, it's a great, if I think it's not going well, then at the 45-minute mark, it's just coffee. I can say, nice to meet you, and then we'll go home.
Peace out.
But if I think it's going well, I can take her to the restaurant. That shows her I'm interested because it's an escalation. And it also gives me an opportunity to see if she's interested because she can either beg off and say no thanks or say, yeah, I'm interested. Let's go.
Right. Do you pay?
Yes, of course. Always. Men, chivalry, don't you dare not pay. Pay for everything.
Right. Yeah.
I know this is expensive, but that's the way it is. Men are to provide. So budget for it.
Let's go. Yeah. Okay, so you go to dinner then.
Yeah, so then you go to dinner and then you chat. And if dinner continues to go well, if you want, there was also a park another few blocks down the street. So I could say, let's just walk around in the park, and we could just walk around in the park as late as we wanted talking.
Smooth operator.
So
can we include that in the show notes? Can we include that song?
Smooth operator?
Hopefully there's no like copyright stuff or
there probably will be. Never mind.
Nah, linking to that something is fine.
Yeah, let's link to Smooth Operator. Check the lyrics first to make sure there's nothing in there.
Yeah.
But you are smooth, man.
Smooth criminal. Do that one too.
Again, you're working hard to optimize the system to high throughput dating, everything everywhere all at once.
Testing the water for dating.
Now, in conversation, and again, especially for guys without a lot of riz, they're kind of like, what do I talk about on a first date? So I'm going to help you out here. A couple of things. Right. First of all, her testimony. This is important. One, because it's a great Christianity check. Because if her testimony is, I went to church.
Right.
She's probably a culture Christian.
Yeah.
If her testimony is, I grew up in the church, but at first I kind of ignored it, and then at some point I sort of made Christ my own, and I understood what it was, and I gave my life over to him. Okay, that's interesting. And the thing is, most testimonies are not like that. Most testimonies are also much longer. They'll talk about their childhood. They'll talk about where they were raised. They'll talk about where they are now.
Yeah.
This gives you a lot of conversation hooks to be like, oh, tell me about your childhood. Or like, you mentioned something there. Tell me more about that. That sounds interesting. So that gives you a way to converse and like naturally gives you lots of conversation hooks to keep the conversation going. going to avoid that first date awkwardness where you're sort of just staring around and you have nothing to talk about.
Yeah, well, absolutely, for sure. This is getting right to where you want to get, right? And it dovetails with our first and most important question, so it's good.
Yeah, and then the other thing you can present is present the thing that you are passionate about. So present like your ethical core, your higher ideal, your as we would call it in Christian theology, your vocation, right? Will she like or dismiss it, right? If you present to her, so for me, right, like I would go in and I would present the fact that God has given me a very intelligent mind. And so I seek to use that for his glory, that like he's given me this responsibility. I'm going to use it well. So I'm constantly trying different secret projects and different this and that. And my book project that you know about, by the way, listeners, I'm working on a book. We'll see if it goes anywhere. But like I'm constantly working on these things. I hope it does. And the reason is like, if you tell her about this, if you tell her your passion and your vocation and she's like, meh, then probably you're not a good match, right? Like maybe your passion is missions and she doesn't want to do missions. That's fair enough. Not everyone's called to missions, but then you're not a good match. So lean into that passion and see what she does with it. Because if she is the kind of person who is to be your wife, she will see that passion and she will be like, that is something I can get behind.
Drawn to that. Yeah, absolutely.
This was something that Taylor said on our first date, that she was like, she watched my passion and like me talking about my projects. And she said that was very attractive, right? Like talk about your passion. And if she's not into it, that's a good sign that you're not matched. If she is, it's going to pull her in. So that's what you ask her. That's what she asks you. And the other thing, just to make sure that you cover the core, which is of course Christianity, which you get through with your testimony, but also make sure that you're both on the same page looking for marriage. This is what we talked about earlier. Just make sure that you're on the same page, that like, hey, I want to be clear that like, I'm not here to just date for the sake of dating. I'm here to pursue dating for the sake of marriage. That's what I'm looking for. And if she says no, fair enough, then you're not matched. But if she says yes, that means that, okay, so there's something there. We know that we might pursue something serious. And then again, a couple of things for just like socially awkward guys. You want to, in a good conversation, you want to pass it back and forth. This is neither an interrogation nor a monologue. Right. And one of the keys for passing back and forth, which was really helpful to me when I learned it, is that particularly this seems a thing with Americans. Americans will do what I've heard called like one-upsmanship in conversation.
Yes.
So if you say, oh, I went to Alaska and I visited Saskatchewan for a day and it was really cool, then I will reply and say, oh, I went to Alaska for 2 weeks and I hunted bears while I was there. What you're doing is you're unintentionally, while you're trying to engage, you're unintentionally just like trying to one up them and say they're like, oh, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Which is the thing you want to do, guys, is when she says, oh, I went to Alaska and I was in Saskatchewan and it was really cool, then go like, what was your favorite thing about Saskatchewan? And like ask her about it and pull that. Like you can tell her about your Alaskan vacation, but like don't just be like, oh, let me engage by telling something cooler I did that's related to it.
Right.
This is sort of an accidental pattern a lot of guys can fall into.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing is the macabre storytelling video that I mentioned way long ago at this point. Yeah. We'll get into it a little bit more. But one of the helpful things you can do if you're really bad at conversation is go to a mall or a busy downtown center and take off your watch, leave your phone in the car, and then just walk around, walk up to people, ask them the time. And then try and engage them in conversation. Just say like, that's a nice pair of shoes. I like your shirt. And then just engage them in conversation. Do this over and over and over again. Take a weekend. Do this with like 200-300 people. You will start to get good. You will start to notice the cues for when people want to converse, when they just want to get out.
Right.
And you will start to get better at that. You will start to get less nervous in conversation. And it's a thing you can do again and again and again. Maybe it will take several weekends, but keep practicing until you can pretty regularly meet a random person, ask them the time, and get into a fun conversation with them. And then, so once you've done your first date, you're aiming to go steady within 3 to 5 dates, basically. So on your second,
now why going steady from 3 to 5?
It's just a rough number. It's not a magic number. Okay. But it's like pretty quickly you should be able to filter through and get out of this like proto dating stage into actual dating and putting aside all of the other first dates you're doing. Or excuse me, first meetings you're doing, because again, we want to be clear here, we're not dating yet. Basically what you're doing in these subsequent meetings is dig into the major questions. In date 1, you already settled that you're both seriously looking for marriage. So in dates, in the meetings 2 and following, basically what you are doing is you're talking about your children, your careers, your aspirations, your family, your finances. Like start talking about all of the things that are to be the most likely deal breakers. And within a few dates, or within a few meetings, you should have gone through all of those things. And you should be at a place where it's like, okay, I think we've met a few times. I think things are going pretty well. We've talked about all the things that are likely deal breakers. I don't see anything. Do we want to make it official? Do we want to go exclusive? And that's where you go for it. And once you have gone exclusive, you did it. That's this whole system. This whole system is just getting you to the point where you have started dating.
Okay, so that's helpful. So talk to the person that just freaked out that you said by 3 to 5 dates you should be now going steady, where they're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, that feels like it's way too fast. That feels like it's premature. There's lots more I might want to know about that person.
Sure.
I mean, as I always say, it's a tool, not a rule.
Yeah, that was a really good thing you came up with, Justin.
I'm going to cut all of the times you say that out of this podcast. Make you sound like a crazy person.
But so to be sure, right? Like, remember, going steady is not a marriage proposal, right? Like, what you have done when you go steady is this is the point where you have just said, I think exclusivity. Yeah. Okay. You've just said, this is the point where I think there's a good chance at marriage.
Okay, so right. I almost prefer that to going steady, because going steady again has so many different. I mean, people make up their own phrase what they want to say, but when you say that, what you're saying is, I would like us to concentrate on our relationship exclusively. I don't want to walk into a coffee shop and see you doing what we're doing with another person. If can we clarify what we're doing here at this process? Yeah. So whatever the time frame is, you're not putting an artificial hurry on 3 to 5. You should be here. What you're saying is, by this point, you should know whether or not you really want to take a more focused step with this person. However long that might be is not. You're not saying okay. I think that's clear. Some people just heard that and they're going to freak out and go, wait, what? Like, no, it's just we should be boyfriend girlfriend. We should be kissing right now. We should be hand holding and like.
Yeah, it's just that within a few dates, it should be pretty clear whether or not this is something you're going to go exclusive and seriously pursue, or whether it's something that like, there seems to be deal breakers here. We're not fit for each other, and that's fine. But you just want to move
see what you're saying. No, that's good. I think that clarity is important. Thank you, Earnest.
Yeah. And then, so, of course, as you talk through all of these big life things, some things are negotiable, right? Like, you'll talk about like, I don't know, dating timelines or dates or stuff like that. Those are negotiable, but do not compromise on core beliefs. If you do, you're going to have it's just going to be a recipe for disaster. You're going to compromise on some core belief because, you love talking with this girl and she's really pretty. But if you compromise on core beliefs, you're going to be miserable, right? Like, compromising on ancillaries is not core beliefs, and just sort of, be clear on that. And one last note. So once you did it, you went exclusive, you sort of, you found someone that you're interested in dating. The only thing I would say after that is, besides go listen to the first 12 episodes, have those under your belt and do those.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Is also, do not forget to continue praying for all of your siblings in Christ who were in the same horrible situation you were in 5 seconds ago. It's so easy for us to only pray about ourselves. To pray about like, oh, God Almighty, I'm sick, help heal me. What about all of your other brothers and sisters in Christ who are also sick? Remember to keep praying for them, and do not forget about them just because your problem is solved.
I see. Okay.
And then the last note I would say for guys just in general is that have fun, right? Like, I was an introvert. I expected this to be a miserable process, but other people are interesting.
No, you've had a lot of fun with this. Yeah. It's actually been fun to watch
you. Even for introverts, like, people are a puzzle and they have fascinating stories. Even if it doesn't work out, if you get good at conversation, introverts, I'm talking to you here, you can pull very interesting conversations from almost. Sometimes there will just be dates that are done, fair enough, but almost everyone has an interesting life story to tell, an interesting conversation. And if you can find that, at least for one day, it will at least be fun. So, and remember, right, like, God is sovereign over all things, and Romans 8:28 is that all things work together for good to those who love God. So this is the trial God has put into your life. So just accept it and live it with gusto, and realize that the God of the universe is on your side. And so, like, you will have your trials, but you can also face them and overcome them. Just be willing to work hard. And ultimately, whether or not you succeed or fail, it will be in God's sovereignty. So go after it and see what God has for you.
Okay, somebody just gagged on the word you called dating a trial, or their singleness a trial.
Well, I suppose I suppose trial in the sense that, both marriage and singleness are the place that God has put you in. It is a wonderful thing, but it is difficult to be single when you want to be married.
Okay, that's fair. But and one of the things we underline in this series is that singleness is a gift. So what you're describing is the tension that sometimes exists when here's where my desire has become a hope that feels deferred. Like Proverbs says, the hope deferred makes the heart sick. So there's a sense in which I want this, I desire this good and righteous thing. I'm trusting God for the timing. I'm being faithful. But I think the word trial could trigger somebody in mind, like, you are suffering. under God's good and perfect will for you.
Sure.
So we're not saying that singleness is itself a cross to bear and a burden.
Right.
We're saying that there are trials, but I almost want a different word.
Yeah. So I guess the difficulty you're in now, because it can be, right, like it's not a trial, it's not a punishment or anything like that, but it's a very difficult thing to want to be married and not, but everything comes from God, including the unpleasant and difficult things, and they are for your good.
Some people married right now would go, I'd love the trial of singleness right now because my marriage is a trial. So, but both of them are a gift from God, and it's not a white elephant gift. Just to clarify.
So that leads us to, so now that I've finished with the guys, to part 5, very briefly, my dating advice particulars for women. So again, as I said, unfortunately, I don't have field experience here because
you're not a woman.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. I'm not a woman.
Unless you want to choose to identify as one.
Yeah, that's true. I could choose to identify as a female toaster oven. And then I could go do some field testing.
You could roast some hot wings for us. Yes.
Yeah. But basically the thing, ladies, that I want to emphasize for you that will be most helpful is understanding the way male swiping patterns work on dating apps so that you can work around them. Because if you say that, like, well, men shouldn't swipe like this, they do. And complaining about the way the world is not going to be helpful to you. So you want to understand just this is how the dating market is structured, unfortunately. So you have to work with what you got the best you can.
Well, there's something here, too, ought to be said about guarding your heart if you're a woman, because the predatory nature of men who you might assume they jump on a Christian app, but they count on human depravity. There is a level of human depravity here that they need to be especially guarded and watchful. And even to say, if you have a woman who's on a dating app, highly, highly recommended levels of accountability, just having some people in place, those daughters of Jerusalem that we talked about in the Song of Solomon, who are there to guard your heart from giving yourself away emotionally, giving yourself away prematurely, putting yourself in a position where now you're going on a date with a guy, you're going on multiple dates with multiple guys in a row. Like that can do a lot to damage a woman and her heart and confuse her. And if she's swooning over a good dressed man who smells great, who's confident leader, and all of a sudden those things are very appealing to her, if she's outside the safety and the protection, if she's not married to her husband, she's obviously, she needs to be under the careful protection of her local church, which is giving her biblical guidance and wisdom and bring this guy around. We want to meet this guy. Like, well, now that this guy is a potential for you, you're not doing this on your own. Like, have the people in your life that are the source of accountability that will see what might not be obvious to you, but it is obvious to those who care about you. I think that's something that, particularly for women, and as a pastor, and I led a singles ministry for several years, and I can tell you the meat market that became, where I chased men out who literally want to say, I want to start with the first girl on the roster, and I want to go all the way through and see if there's any. If there's not, I'll move to the next church. And I'm like, get the heck out of here right now, you freak! Like that direct quote. Women want to go to a church where they know they're going to be safe and protected from predators who don't see this as a, so having that level of biblical support with you by people who share our convictions, I think for women especially, different than men. Men don't need they need to be guarded against temptation. Right. But the level of security provided in this process, I think, is worth underlining.
Yeah. And I think that, especially ladies, if you're going to do anything similar to the system I described for men and modify it in your own way, even more so, the importance of using something like the notebook to help you think objectively about it is going to be crucial to keep yourself focused. And I feel terrible. I did miss a thing. I knew I was missing one thing. So one other thing for men, on your first meeting, at the end of the meeting, do not press for a second one in person. There are 2 reasons for this. So at the end of your meeting, just say that, like, this was a lovely time. I will get back to you in a day or 2, and then do that. And here's why. 2 reasons. First of all, chivalry. You are a guy that a woman met 5 seconds ago. And men, what you do not want to do is apply any sort of pressure where she's like, I met this guy 2 hours ago for the first time. If I say no, is he going to flip out and try and axe murder me? I don't know. Right. You want to apply 0 pressure to her. And if you're like, oh, but like, if I don't apply pressure, then when she's thinking about it over text, she might say no. If she was so on the fence that the fact that she's had a few hours to think about it and replies no the next day, that means that it just wasn't going to work anyway. It wasn't going to work out. You don't want to pressure the women, right? Like, you want to give them that space to decide without fear.
Good.
And now sometimes what will happen is, this is what happened with Taylor, where when we were walking from the coffee shop to the to dinner, she didn't even realize she was doing this. She would tell me after. She was talking with me about like, well, this Friday I'm going dancing. Would you like to go dancing with me? So she was already all over it. So sometimes magic happens. Although even there, like our schedule didn't work out Friday, and at the end of the date, I still said, even though it went so well, I still said, I will get back to you in a day or two, because reason number 2, you need time to think and pray about it.
Yes, agree.
Right? This is what you want to do. Again, whether or not use the notebook, go back, think about it, pray about it, make sure it's not just, oh, this girl was pretty and she swept me off my feet or whatever.
Yeah, the impulse of the moment. Look for objective reasons. Yeah.
So telling them, I'll get back to you in a day or two, just allows you to step back, her to not be afraid, and it's good for everyone all around. So do that. But okay, back to women, that aside finished. So for you, you have to understand that men will swipe very easily and for everything. So if they think there's even a 1% chance the two of you could match, they will swipe.
Interesting.
Which is the same thing I did, right? Like, because there are so many swipes, they know they have to do a mass swiping approach to make sure they get something. So if there was even a little bit of a chance I was interested, I would always swipe. I would always send a message. Okay. And on Upward and Bumble, right, like where I couldn't send messages, I would swipe even more aggressively and look at profiles for an even shorter period of time, because there was nothing to engage with. I couldn't write a message. So I would very briefly skim the profile and then just swipe right. If there was even a chance, because most men will end up filtering after the match, not at the liking stage, because they know they have to compete so hard. They will swipe almost everything, and then they will filter at the match to like really read through the profile carefully. So ladies, what you want to do is you want to put your most important things first. So I remember one time on Upwards early on, I remember reading through this girl's profile, and it was really nice. All the way at the bottom of her profile, she said, I am a confessional Westminster Presbyterian, which means I take a hard stance on infant baptism. And if you disagree with me on that, it's not going to work. Wow. Great, fine, whatever. Lovely. Don't put that at the bottom of your profile. You know how few guys are going to get to the bottom of your profile? Right. So few of them are going to read it. You're going to have, and this was on Upward, which was the Christian app. So many guys are going to swipe right after reading half your profile. Right. And then you're going to have to filter that. Make that the first, if that's so important to you, put that at the very top of your profile. Yeah. Right.
That's
like
the differentiation value. Yeah.
If you're a Christian and you're on like Hinge, which is just a general dating app, not a Christian one, put the fact that you're a Christian and your Christian commitments as the first thing. Right. This won't filter out everyone, because a lot of guys will literally just look at the top photo, look at if she's hot or not, and then swipe based on that. Yeah. But
even me, I was an atheist, and I was interested in Christians because I thought, oh, they're pure, they're moral. That's great.
But it will at least help cut down a little bit. And another thing is, right, like a lot of girls on their profiles will say something like, don't swipe right if you're looking to hook up. The guys who are looking to hook up are going to swipe right everywhere anyway, because they're swiping right on basically everyone when they look at your first profile photo, decide if you're hot enough to worth it, and swipe right. So what you want to do is you're wasting basically precious real estate on something that won't help. So what you would do is frame that as a positive assertion that says something about you. So don't swipe if you're looking for a hookup. Say something like, I'm looking for, like me, I am a, conservative Christian. I'm looking to get married and to settle down and to have kids. That's my goal on this app. So, the guys who want to hook up are still going to swipe right because they're not going to read your profile. But the guys who aren't, they're going to see one more piece of evidence on your profile of like, this is something that I can get behind and something that can make me swipe right. So you're more likely to pick up more of the guys who might be what you're looking for. The other thing that is incredibly effective for women is proactively swiping and messaging. Women tend to message at much lower rates than men, especially because you get so many likes. Women will tend to just go through the likes that they have and not proactively go out and swipe. If they do that, going out proactively, because men so rarely get outreach, if you as a woman go out and you outreach on Hinge and you write a little, like one sentence note like I did for the girls, you're going to get a huge amount of response. And so doing that allows you to sort of get your pick of the guys who might actually be something you're looking for, not just the guys who are looking for an easy hookup or whatever.
Okay, let me ask you a question. So how do women, practically speaking, because we want to guard the purity of our women, how do they identify genuine interest versus somebody who, like you said, they're just going to swipe, they have this superficial, yeah, I believe in that, I agree with that. These women need to have some sort of criteria by which they filter out the guy that's just interested in getting them in bed, the guy that's got a ignoble purpose. He is going to play and pretend to be what you want because he has ulterior motives.
Yeah, and so there is a secular term for this that is bad word testing, so I'm not going to say it, but let's call it pressure testing to be nice.
Okay.
But essentially what you are doing is you are testing them in conversation to see if they ever disagree with you.
This is in live or this is on the messaging?
This is in live.
Okay.
Basically what you do is, so you sit down with this guy, and as you're talking with him, see if he ever, what you're defending against, to be clear, is two things. Not just people who are looking for sex, but you're also defending against people who, the Zoomers would call simps. But basically these are people who find their validation, like they're so desperate for women, they will find their validation in just, if I can have any woman, it will make me feel personally validated.
Is simp like a play on pimp?
I think it's a play on simpering. As like you're a very simpering person who sort of just cowers and says whatever.
Got it. Okay. You'll do whatever it takes to get it.
I see.
So you want to guard against both of those. The way you do that is through this, quote, pressure testing, where you push against him and you see, does this guy only give me the answers that I want, or does he give me? So like, if I'm telling him and I'm like, well, I'm a 5-point Calvinist, I believe blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, actually I'm a 4-point Calvinist and I disagree with limited atonement because this and that. If he's disagreeing with you, that's a very good chance that he's not either a simp or a sex fiend, because what he's doing is he's willing to compromise the possibility of a relationship to say that, like, I'm looking for something serious and I'm not just going to mirror. Now the thing is, there is a chance that you will meet a guy who is just so perfect that he will say that he will mirror everything you tell him.
Right.
And you don't want to just accidentally throw that out because he's too perfect.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
So, typically women have pretty good BS meters, and they will be able to tell. But the other thing you can do is if this guy is really good and you keep, there's two things you can do. Number one, ask an open-ended question. So don't say, I'm a 5-point Calvinist. Say, what's your theory of atonement? And see what he says. Right. And then disagree with him and see what happens.
Yeah. That's good. Interesting. Yeah.
But the other thing you can do is, if it really is just lining up perfectly, you can also just, at that point, start meeting, at that point, you're probably a few meetings in. See about meeting his friends or going to his church or doing something else to basically, at this point, you're background checking him.
Well, and that's good, but you're also doing some things like, if I were to say to you, or if I was single and I was doing this and I'm sitting in a conversation, if I were to ask somebody, so is prayer an important part of your spiritual life? Well, what are they going to say? Well, of course. Yeah.
Right,
but if I were on the flip side, going to say, why don't you tell me the things in your life that really draw you closer to God?
Yes.
And they never mention prayer. I know it's not important to them. So there's a way for you to not reveal by your question what you're asking.
Right.
If the answer is implied in the question, you can just give them the answer that placates them, that lowers their guard, so that makes them vulnerable. So I really like what you're saying, that pressure testing of being willing to disagree, being willing to even see how they handle pushback and that kind of thing. But those are very, very good signs.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, ladies, that's all I have for you, because I am not a woman. I couldn't field test the rest. But that finally gets us to the final part 6, which is our final resources and conclusion. Good Lord, this is a very long podcast, Braden. I'm sorry you're going to have to edit all of this.
Well, but, and a lot of this stuff here that you can put in the show notes. Why don't we do this? Why don't you, because we need to land the plane here, why don't you, let's summarize the advantages of this, but also let's end with the cautions of the warnings. Yeah. I think that'd be a helpful way to give people the ability to decipher, if I decide I'm going to do this, and if I want to move forward, what would be the thing that you would say, here's the advantage, because you've laid out the strategy. It's super, super thorough and helpful. But also, please, above all, Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, watch over your heart, flow it from the springs of life. Right. What would you say is the summary to both? Yeah,
let me run through a couple of the resources real quick. So some of these you'll see in the show notes. So self-maximize basically talks about doing useful self-improvement, and all of the caveats we'll have listed in the show notes, so you can just read them there. But self-maximize is very good for just learning how to do self-improvement well and how to respond. And it's generally useful, but of course he targets it towards dating. And it is the only other video from Home Math I would recommend. I would recommend none of his other videos because the rest of them are all basically terrible. The Pragmatist Guide to Relationships is the best book on this kind of thing that you can do. And it is full of incisive genius, but also moral insanity, because again, they're libertarians, and sometimes just like really left field takes where you're like, I'm sorry, what? So if you are a young Christian, or if you are an immature Christian, do not read this book alone. Read this book with an older, wiser Christian who can filter it for you, who can baptize the gold from the dross, because while this has a lot of useful info, it also has a lot of crazy things. So just be careful with it, but it is a 700-page book on relationships, which was written by a neuroscientist and his wife.
You have it on the desk right here.
It is a doorstopper.
Okay, continue.
And it can be quite helpful. There's also Dating a Research Journal by a blog called Put a Number on It, which Again, the guy's kind of libertarian about his sexual morality, but it's very helpful in just like the practicals of online dating. And while it was written in 2015 before OkCupid was lobotomized, so it's not all up to date, it still has a lot of useful principles. I do have to, unfortunately, anti-recommend one thing, which is the Effective Purpose. There's a YouTube channel called Effective Purpose. This guy is, he is a Christian, and I don't think he has any ill will or is trying to scam anyone. But while he talks from the framework of Christian morality, his assumptions about male and female relationships and psychology are still way too informed by the red pill community, which unfortunately makes him more dangerous than an actual red pill, because an actual red pill is so crazy you can usually just like discount it. But because he talks in biblical moral terms, you sort of get taken in by it.
Oh, interesting.
So like my girlfriend sent this to me when she knew I was working on this podcast notes structure, because she was like, oh, this guy might be helpful. I just came across him. And at first I was really into it and I was like, this is great. But the more you listen to him, you're like, your underlying assumptions about how men and women relate to each other are still sort of drawn from the Andrew Tate types, which is really unfortunate, because I think he's trying to do the right thing. I just think he's misinformed.
Okay.
So Effective YouTube channel, Effective Purpose YouTube channel. If you come across it, don't watch it. And then finally, snapper.com can help you get professional photos done. And photofeeler.com is a place where you can get your photos rated. So you can post them on there.
Really?
Yes. And you can pay for whatever your target demographic is. So ladies, you can pay for guys, and guys, you can pay for girls to rate your photos, to basically say which ones are the best ones. Because, you'll probably get like 50 photos from your professional photo person. And then whittle those down to the top 5 or 6 that you're going to use in your dating profile, which are the most attractive, and so on and so forth.
That's clever.
So to answer your question though, Justin, of like final conclusions, things to guard against, things to particularly watch out for. For guys particularly, I would say just I think the most important thing for you is, as you are doing all of this, remember that it's very easy to fall for physical attraction. And just to make sure you really drill, this was the thing I always had trouble, I was really, really focused on when it was sometimes difficult, drill to make sure they're not just culture Christians. It's so easy for someone to say she goes to church and to say she loves Jesus, and really drilling to see in those first couple of meetings, like, are you going to give me the answers of someone who knows the Bible stories, or are you going to give me the answers of someone who has given her life over to Christ and doesn't just know the Bible answers, but actually really knows how that applies to her life and like integrates those into her heart and into her conversation.
Right.
For women, I think the biggest thing would be like guard your men are much more physical, women are more emotional, so guard your emotions, guard your heart. If you're going to do something like this, even more so than guys, you really have to be cautious that you don't let your emotions take you on a ride during these early meetings, and that as much as possible you try and stay objective. Like a really big thing is have trustworthy friends you can go to. I did for both the guys and the gals at this point, like have trustworthy friends where you're like, I don't know about this person, I want to talk to you about them. This was really helpful for me. There was one girl who I went out on and met a couple of times, and it was like she was really sweet and she was really nice and I really liked her, but it was just like in talking with my friends about it, it was helpful. Elijah actually gave me some pointers on like, ask her these kinds of questions to see how she responds, because you're afraid she's a culture Christian. And she did just the way he said she would if she was a culture Christian, which is, that's the kind of thing you want, where you can have people counsel you to be like, I think maybe, but I can't tell. And they can tell you like, oh, ask her this kind of question. Consider this, like, how did she respond when you asked this? And they will help you to filter and to make sure when you're meeting people you have never met before online or based off of like a connection because your parents met someone at the grocery store or whatever, that you're able to work through it to make sure they're really a Christian.
That's good.
I think there we go.
What would you add to that, Braden? Any cautions or as you've been interacting with this and watching this, what is there anything you would add to what's been said?
I think a big thing to add is, just going back, like I like how you pointed out, like, praying about it and taking that time. I think just a big thing to add is like, don't get discouraged, like when going through this process, like make sure that you are making this about the Lord and finding a relationship that honors and glorifies him and not just about you finding a mate, right? And guard your heart also from discontentment. Like make sure your motives in searching for a woman or a man is not to fill that hole in your heart, right? Because that's what Jesus, he's supposed to take that spot. He's supposed to be your satisfaction, right? So find your contentment in Christ and seek a woman to honor him.
Yeah. And if somebody listens to this and goes, you know what? I don't want to do that. That's okay.
That's great.
That's okay.
Don't do
If
it.
somebody goes, hey, listen, this is intriguing. I want to take these steps. Is there a place they can reach out to us for more information? It's info@itstandswritten.org. Is that right?
Yeah, we will put the email in the show notes. Again, just access the show notes for all of the resources that Earnest talked about, and then we'll have our email in there. And then also, I believe on Spotify, I don't know about any other platforms, there is a spot where you can message us directly, and we will see that and we can respond to you guys.
Awesome. Great.
Well, listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of the It Stands Written podcast. Ernest, thank you so much for taking the time to do all this research. We hope this was insightful and helpful for you guys, and we will, Lord willing, see you guys on the next episode.